To the silent watchers, the patient souls who stand vigil in the quiet places of the world, whose strength is not in the roar of battle, but in the steadfast endurance of the storm. To those who understand that the deepest truths are often whispered by the wind and etched in the slow, inexorable grind of ancient ice. This story is for those who find solace in the desolate beauty of a world preparing for its end, and for those who, like Vidar, carry the weight of ages in their hearts, ready to greet the dawn even in the deepest twilight. May your watch be rewarded, and may the quiet strength within you always find its purpose. The world had not merely grown cold, it had fundamentally changed. Winter, the great winter foretold, was no longer a prophecy whispered in hushed tones by fearful mortals or an ominous sign observed by the ever watchful gods. It was the present, a relentless, all consuming reality that had irrevocably altered the face of existence. For years, the sun had been a pale, indifferent disk, struggling to pierce the perpetual veil of bruised gray clouds that choked the sky. Each day was a mere continuation of the last, a cycle of biting wind and swirling snow that seemed to possess a malevolent sentience, an active participant in the slow, agonizing death of the old world. The light, when it deigned to appear, was a weak, watery imitation of its former glory, casting long, mournful shadows across a landscape sculpted by frost and ice. The northern cliffs, Vidar's solitary domain, bore the brutal artistry of Winter like a scar. The very stone was etched and worn by the ceaseless assault of the wind, its surface a tapestry of razor-sharp ice shards and deep, frozen fissures. Snow, piled in drifts higher than a man, transform familiar landmarks into alien, shifting dunes of white. The wind was a constant, mournful dirge, a symphony of whistles and howls that clawed at the senses, carrying with it the sting of ice particles that could flay flesh from bone in moments. It was a force that could bend the sturdiest trees, snap the strongest branches, and bury entire valleys under its suffocating embrace. Yet, Vidar moved within this maelstrom not as a victim, but as an intrinsic part of it, his movements honed by necessity, his existence a testament to an endurance forged in the heart of the elemental fury. The air itself was a palpable entity, so frigid that each breath felt like a searing wound to the lungs. It was a cold that did not merely chill the body, but seeped into the very marrow, a constant, gnawing ache that was the background music to Vidar's life, the world of the gods, the grand halls of Asgard, the boisterous mead halls, the epic battles that shaped the fate of realms. All of it felt impossibly distant, like echoes from a forgotten dream. Here, on the edge of the world, where the sea itself was beginning to freeze over in vast, impenetrable sheets, such tales were mere myths, the faint resonance of a time when the world was not yet gripped by the iron fist of an eternal winter. The grandeur and might of the Aesir seemed a world away from the stark, elemental reality that dictated survival on these frozen plains. Vidar's days were not filled with the clash of steel or the pronouncements of fate, but with the silent, arduous task of simply enduring. The stark beauty of this frozen realm was undeniable, a brutal, unforgiving elegance that spoke of a world in its final, majestic decline. The snow, when it fell in less violent sheets, could transform the jagged landscape into a panorama of breathtaking purity. Sunlight, catching on the myriad ice crystals, would fracture into 1,000 rainbows, a fleeting mockery of warmth and life. The wind, in its calmer moments, would sculpt the snow into exquisite, ephemeral forms, ephemeral sculptures that would be reshaped or obliterated with the next gust. Yet, this beauty was always tinged with a profound melancholy, a reminder of the encroaching darkness, the suffocating grip of an unending winter that promised no thaw, no respite, no return to the verdant life that was now merely a memory. Vidar had learned to read the landscape not as a static backdrop, but as a living, breathing entity, albeit one locked in a deathly slumber. He understood the language of the frost, the subtle shifts in the ice that warned of treacherous thinness, the groaning of the glaciers as they stressed and shifted under their own immense weight. The very silence of this frozen world was pregnant with meaning, a profound stillness that settled over the land, broken only by the relentless wind and the occasional unsettling crack of ice. It was a silence that spoke of ages past, of forgotten beginnings, and of an ending that was now unfolding with inexorable, chilling certainty. This was his vigil, his purpose, his curse, and his singular, solitary existence. The palpable cold was more than just a physical sensation. It was a mirror reflecting the profound isolation that had become the very essence of his being. The years had blurred into a monotonous sequence of white and gray, punctuated by the gnawing hunger and the constant battle against the elements. Vidar's world had shrunk to the immediate, the biting wind against his weathered face, the crunch of snow beneath his thick boots, the desperate search for sustenance in a land that offered little. The great trees that once dotted these northern regions were now skeletal specters, their branches encased in ice, their roots buried deep beneath the frozen earth. The very sky seemed to press down, a heavy, suffocating blanket that offered no hope of escape. Yet, within this desolation, Vidar had carved out a life. His movements were economical, honed by necessity. He knew the optimal times to venture out, when the wind's fury abated slightly, when the snow was less likely to bury him alive. His senses, sharpened by years of constant vigilance, were attuned to the subtlest changes in his environment. He could discern the faint scent of a hardy winter herb pushing through a crack in the ice, the almost imperceptible shift in the wind's direction that might signal a change in weather, however minor. These were not the skills of a warrior or a king, but of a creature perfectly adapted to a dying world, a silent sentinel in the face of an inevitable twilight. The world of the gods, though distant, was not entirely forgotten. It existed in the stories that had been passed down, the sagas that spoke of Odin's wisdom, Thor's might, and Loki's cunning. But here, on the fringes of existence, these tales felt like whispers from another dimension. The concerns of Asgard, the political intrigues, the divine squabbles, the grand pronouncements seemed utterly irrelevant when the very act of drawing breath was a battle. Fimbulwinter had a way of reducing all concerns to the most primal needs: warmth, sustenance, and the desperate will to survive. The landscape itself was a testament to this brutal reality. The snow was not merely powder, it was a dense, compacted mass, often layered with a treacherous sheen of ice, making every step a calculated risk. The wind was a sculptor, carving drifts into monstrous shapes that could disorient and trap the unwary. Occasionally, a great gust would rip through the air, sending sheets of snow into the sky, creating a blinding, suffocating whiteout that could swallow a man whole. It was in these moments of extreme peril that Vidar's connection to the land became most profound. He learned to anticipate the wind's moods, to seek shelter in the lee of ancient rock formations that had withstood millennia of such assaults, to read the subtle signs that a blizzard was gathering its strength. His isolation was not merely physical, it was existential. He was a solitary figure in a world that had largely ceased to care about the affairs of mortals, and perhaps even the affairs of gods. The grand cosmic clock was ticking down, and Fimbulwinter was merely the first, most tangible symptom of an approaching, all-encompassing doom. The stories of Ragnarok, the twilight of the gods, were the whispers that reached him even here, carried on the frigid winds, hinted at in the unnatural stillness of the skies. But for Vidar, Ragnarok was not a future event. It was a present reality, a slow, agonizing descent into a world stripped bare of its warmth and light. The oppressive atmosphere was not just in the biting cold or the ceaseless snow. It was in the very quality of the silence. It was a silence that had no peace, a stillness that was heavy with unspoken dread. It was the silence of a world holding its breath, waiting for the inevitable end. Vidar, in his solitary watch, was the only one truly present, truly aware, truly enduring this suffocating, frozen reality. His existence was a stark reminder that even in the grand tapestry of cosmic events, individual acts of endurance and quiet purpose held a profound, if often unacknowledged, significance. The cold that seeped into his bones was the very essence of Fimbulwinter, a chilling testament to his lonely vigil. The biting wind was Vidar's constant companion, a sculptor of ice and a relentless whisperer of ancient truths. He moved through the northern reaches, a solitary figure against a canvas of white and gray. His existence, a quiet testament to an unsung duty. The sagas, sung in the warmer mead halls of Asgard, spoke of thunderous battles, of gods and heroes locked in epic struggles that shaped the destinies of worlds. They spoke of Odin's wisdom, Thor's might, and the intricate, often treacherous dance of Loki. But Vidar's story was written in the silent language of the frozen earth, in the patient observation of a horizon that rarely offered anything but the unending, unforgiving expanse of Fimbulwinter. His strength was not forged in the heat of battle, but in the deep, unyielding resilience cultivated in the heart of an eternal chill. For centuries, or perhaps millennia, time had become a fluid concept, marked not by the turning of seasons, but by the subtle shifts in the wind's howl and the gradual thickening of the ice. Vidar had kept his vigil. His task was a simple one, stripped of the grandiosity that characterized the exploits of his divine kin. He was to watch, to listen, to wait. The object of his watch was the northern horizon, a seemingly immutable line where the bruised sky met the frosted earth. The sound he listened for was a horn, a legendary call that had remained silent for an age, its resonance lost in the cacophony of the world's slow demise. It was a duty that offered no glory, no recognition, only the profound quietude of an unbroken vigil. His connection to the land was not one of dominion, but of deep, intimate understanding. He moved with a grace born of necessity, each step placed with the precision of a hunter who knows his prey. The snow, which to the uninitiated was merely an impediment, was to Vidar a complex tapestry. He could read the subtle depressions that spoke of hidden crevasses, the almost imperceptible shift in the snow's texture that warned of a thin ice crust. He knew which rocks offered the best shelter from the wind, which shallow caves, carved by ancient frosts, could provide a respite from the biting cold. His senses, honed to an almost supernatural acuity, could detect the faint tremor of the earth beneath the ice, the distant groan of a glacier shifting its immense weight, the telltale crack that signaled a new fracture spiderwebbing across a frozen expanse. This was the language of his world, a dialect of frost, wind, and stone, and Vidar was its sole, fluent speaker. The silence was not an absence of sound, but a presence in itself. It was a deep, resonant stillness that permeated the very air, broken only by the wind's lament or the sharp, sudden report of ice fracturing under immense pressure. In this profound quiet, Vidar found a strange kind of peace. It was the peace of absolute focus, of an existence distilled to its most essential elements. There were no distractions, no clamor of competing needs or desires, only the stark reality of survival and the unwavering commitment to his solitary watch. He had learned to find solace in this emptiness, to draw strength from the profound quietude that had become the very fabric of his being. His days were a rhythm of movement and stillness, dictated by the unforgiving dictates of Fimble winter. He would rise before the weak, grudging light of the sun even dared to touch the horizon, his body a finely tuned instrument that required little coaxing to face the day's challenges. His shelter, a hollow carved into the side of a glacial outcropping, was a testament to his understanding of the earth's contours. It was not grand, nor comfortable by the standards of Asgard, but it was warm enough, a bastion against the relentless cold. Within its icy embrace, he would prepare his meager meal, typically dried fish or strips of hardy winter meat, preserved through the painstaking art of freezing. After his meal, he would emerge, his breath misting in the frigid air, and begin his circuit. He would traverse the frozen plains, his eyes sweeping across the vast, white expanse, constantly scanning the northern horizon. It was a landscape that had long since shed its verdant past, its once proud forests now reduced to skeletal silhouettes, their branches encrusted with a thick armor of ice, their roots locked in the permafrost. The rivers and lakes were no longer conduits of life-giving water, but vast, unbroken sheets of impenetrable ice, their surfaces a mirror reflecting the oppressive, leaden sky. His gait was steady, unhurried, yet imbued with an inherent purpose. He was not merely walking, he was observing, absorbing, cataloging every subtle change. He noted the pattern of the wind's drift on the snow, the way it sculpted the drifts into ever-changing, ephemeral sculptures. He watched the flight of the few hardy birds that still managed to eke out an existence in this frozen wasteland, their calls thin and reedy against the immensity of the silence. These were not the grand pronouncements of fate, but the quiet whispers of a world clinging to the very edge of oblivion. There were moments, rare and fleeting, when the sun would break through the perpetual cloud cover, casting long, sharp shadows across the snow-covered landscape. In these instances, the ice crystals would catch the light, refracting it into a dazzling, ephemeral display of color. It was a beauty that was both breathtaking and deeply sorrowful, a stark reminder of a world that had once been bathed in warmth and light, Vidar would pause, his gaze fixed on this fleeting spectacle, a silent acknowledgement of the beauty that persisted even in the face of utter desolation. It was a beauty that mirrored the quiet strength within him, a resilience that refused to be extinguished even when surrounded by the encroaching darkness. His patience was not a passive waiting, but an active, conscious effort. It was the patience of a seed waiting for the sun, the patience of a mountain enduring the erosion of millennia. He understood that his duty was not one that could be rushed, nor one that could be fulfilled through haste or impatience. It required a steadfastness that mirrored the unyielding nature of the ice itself. He was a monument to endurance, a sentinel whose vigil was measured not in days or years, but in the slow, inexorable march of an age. The sagas often spoke of the gods' pronouncements, their decrees that shaped the destinies of mortals and realms. They spoke of divine intervention, of the thunderous arrival of Thor, or the cunning stratagems of Odin. But here, in the desolate north, such events felt like echoes from a distant, forgotten epoch. Vidar's existence was a solitary immersion in the elemental forces of nature, a testament to the power of individual will against the overwhelming tide of cosmic change. He was not a participant in the grand theater of divine affairs. He was a quiet observer on its desolate fringes, a guardian of a silent promise. His thoughts, when they turned to the grander schemes of the cosmos, were not filled with the anxieties of the gods or the struggles of the Aesir. Instead, they were focused on the tangible realities of his existence, the subtle signs of an approaching storm, the best paths to navigate the ever shifting ice fields, the faint scent of life that might persist beneath the frozen surface. His mind, like his life, had been stripped bare of all extraneous concerns, reduced to the essential focus of his solitary watch. He carried no grand weapon, no artifact of immense power. His strength lay in his understanding of the land, his endurance, and the quiet, unwavering conviction that his vigil held a significance beyond what any saga could articulate. He was a living embodiment of patience, a solitary beacon in a world that had all but surrendered to the darkness. The horn remained silent, the horizon unchanged, but Vidar's watch continued, an unbroken thread of quiet resolve woven into the very fabric of the frozen world. His duty was his identity, his isolation, his strength, and his unwavering gaze fixed on the north, a silent promise waiting to be kept. The vastness of his solitude was not a burden, but a canvas upon which the profound stillness of his purpose was painted, a testament to the enduring power of quiet vigilance in a world teetering on the brink of an eternal twilight. The stark beauty of the frost-covered world was not merely a backdrop to his existence, but an integral part of it, a reflection of the inner resilience that allowed him to stand sentinel against the encroaching void. Each frozen peak, each wind-sculpted drift was a familiar landmark in his unchanging domain, a silent witness to his unwavering commitment. He was a part of this desolate beauty, as much as the ice and the wind, his very being infused with the profound, enduring spirit of the northern wilds. The immensity of Vidar's solitude was not an absence, but a fullness. The void left by the absence of others was instead occupied by the profound, omnipresent sentience of the northern realms. The biting wind, that constant sculptor of his harsh domain, was not merely a force of nature. It was an ancient entity, a sentient breath that whispered secrets only he could decipher. It coursed through the ice-sheathed branches of the skeletal trees, weaving a symphony of groans and sighs that spoke of ages long past, of the very genesis of this frozen world. Vidar would tilt his head, his senses attuned, not to a cacophony of noise, but to a nuanced language. The wind's higher pitches, sharp and keening, spoke of distant movements, of subtle shifts in the atmospheric currents that might herald a change in the weather, or perhaps something more. Its deeper, resonant hums, felt more than heard, spoke of the earth's own slow, geologic breathing, of the immense pressures that lay dormant beneath the ice, the ceaseless snow, an endless white shroud that blanketed the land, was not an enemy to be battled, but a vast, silent canvas upon which the history of the world was written. Vidar moved across its surface with an intimate knowledge, not of a surveyor charting territory, but of a scholar reading an ancient script. Each drift, sculpted by the wind into ephemeral dunes and sharp ridges, held a story. The texture of the snow, its density and granularity, told him of its age, of how many cycles of freezing and thawing it had endured, of the intensity of the blizzards that had deposited it. He could distinguish the subtle variations that marked the passage of time, the difference between snow that had fallen yesterday and snow that had lain undisturbed for decades, preserving the memory of the winds that had shaped it. He learned to read the subtle indentations left by the passage of the few hardy creatures that still roamed these wastes, identifying their species, their approximate size, and even their direction of travel, all from the delicate impressions they left in the pristine white. And then there was the earth itself, the ancient, unyielding bedrock that lay beneath the ice. It was a presence that resonated deep within Vidar's bones, a primal connection that grounded him. He could feel its immense, sleeping power, the slow, inexorable forces that had shaped mountains and carved valleys over eons. When the ground beneath his feet gave a low, resonant groan, it was not an ominous sound, but a familiar greeting. He understood it as the earth adjusting its ancient bones, a sigh of contentment, or perhaps a murmur of disquiet, depending on the subtle vibrations that pulsed through the frozen soil. He learned to interpret the fissures that webbed across exposed rock faces, seeing not just cracks, but ancient wounds, scars left by the titanic forces of geological upheaval. These patterns, complex and intricate, held a beauty of their own, a stark testament to the enduring power of creation and destruction. His communion with these elemental forces was a silent, wordless dialogue. He would often pause in his solitary travels, not to rest, but to listen, to feel, to absorb the whispers of the world around him. He would place a hand against the cold, rough surface of an ancient glacier, feeling the slow, immense flow of ice, the generations of frozen water locked within its depth. He sensed the accumulated memories within that frigid mass, the echoes of storms long past, the spectral presence of light that had once pierced through clearer skies. It was a profound connection, a recognition of shared existence, even in their vastly different forms. The elements were not separate from him. They were extensions of his own being, and he of theirs. The aurora borealis, when it graced the night sky, was for Vidar not just a celestial phenomenon, but a sacred text written in shimmering light. The vibrant curtains of green, violet, and red that danced across the darkness were not random displays. They were cosmic pronouncements, a celestial language. that spoke of the universe's grand design. He would spend hours watching their ethereal ballet, tracing the patterns, sensing the currents of energy that fueled their spectacular performance. He saw in their shifting hues and undulating forms the pulse of the cosmos, the ebb and flow of powers far beyond mortal comprehension. He understood them as a visual manifestation of the unseen forces that governed existence, a breathtaking reminder of the vibrant, dynamic nature of the universe, even in its most desolate corners. This intimate relationship with the natural world provided Vidar with a perspective that was utterly alien to the gods of Asgard, or indeed to any mortal, while they engaged in their grand schemes, their battles, and their political machinations. Vidar was immersed in a deeper, more fundamental reality. He understood that the cosmic turmoil that might threaten the realms was intrinsically linked to the fundamental forces of existence, the very powers that shaped the ice and the wind, the stars and the earth. His grounding in the natural world gave him an anchor, a profound understanding that the ephemeral struggles of the gods were but a single thread in the vast, intricate tapestry of creation. He did not seek to control these forces, nor to bend them to his will. His was a relationship of deep respect and profound understanding. He had learned that true strength lay not in dominion, but in harmony, in the ability to exist as a part of the grand, unfolding process of the universe. The elements, in their raw, untamed power, were his teachers, and his lessons were etched not in parchment, but in the very fabric of his being. The frost that rimed his beard, the chill that permeated his very bones, these were not inconveniences, but badges of honor, symbols of his deep and abiding connection to the enduring spirit of the North. There were times when the silence of his companions felt almost conversational. A gust of wind, whistling through a particular crevice in the glacial ice, might seem to carry a mournful lament, a lament for the world that had passed, for the warmth and life that had long since receded. Vidar would often find himself responding, not with words, but with a subtle shift in his stance, a slow nod of his head, as if acknowledging the sentiment, sharing in the ancient sorrow. The earth, in its deep stillness, could sometimes convey a sense of immense patience, a stoic endurance that mirrored his own. He felt its slow, inexorable growth, the imperceptible push of rock and ice that had shaped the landscape over millennia. And in that stillness, he found a profound sense of belonging, a reassurance that even in the face of apparent stagnation, life, in its most fundamental forms, persisted. His perception of time, too, was shaped by his companions. The rapid passage of mortal years, the rise and fall of empires, the fleeting passions of gods, these were but blips in the vast geological timescale that he experienced through the slow erosion of mountains and the glacial creep of ice. The aurora's cyclical dance, the predictable patterns of the wind's prevailing direction, the subtle but constant deepening of the permafrost, these were the markers of his existence. His companions did not speak in seconds or minutes, but in epochs and ages, and Vidar, in his solitary vigil, had learned to measure his own life by their immeasurable rhythms. He saw the raw, unadulterated power of creation and destruction in the ceaseless battle between ice and stone, wind and snow. A blizzard was not just a storm, it was a furious tempest of transformation, stripping away the old, shaping the new, a potent reminder of the constant flux that underpinned even the most seemingly static environments. When a glacial ice shelf calved, sending colossal chunks of ice crashing into the frigid sea, it was not a destructive event, but a testament to the Earth's dynamic nature, a release of immense pent up energy, a continuation of an eternal cycle. Vidar would witness these events with a quiet awe, recognizing his own transient existence within their timeless grandeur. This deep communion with the natural world was not a comfort in the conventional sense. It was a fundamental aspect of his being. It was the source of his strength, the bedrock of his understanding, and the silent testament to his enduring purpose. His companions were the very essence of the world he guarded, and in their shared existence, Vidar found a purpose that transcended the need for companionship in the form of sentient beings. He was a part of the ancient, enduring heart of the North, and it was in that profound, elemental connection that he truly lived. The subtle shifts in the atmospheric pressure felt as a tingling in his extremities, the faint scent of ozone that preceded a solar flare that would ignite the auroras, the almost imperceptible hum of the Earth's magnetic field. These were the intimations of existence that nourished his solitary soul. He was a shepherd of silence, a guardian of the elemental, and his flock was the wild, untamed spirit of the frozen world. The silence that had become Vidar's constant companion was not an emptiness, but a vast, resonant presence. It was a stillness that had gathered and deepened over countless millennia, a silent testament to the immense weight of time and the enduring echoes of epochs long vanished. This was not the quiet of a slumbering world, but the hushed reverence of a sacred space, a place where the very air seemed to hold its breath, pregnant with the memory of events that had long since faded from the annals of gods and mortals alike. His vigil was not a mere appointment, it was an inheritance, a burden passed down through an unbroken lineage of watchers, each one a sentinel against the encroaching darkness, a guardian of a forgotten threshold. The desolate expanse he patrolled was more than just frozen earth and ice. It was a place imbued with a unique historical gravity. Here, the very fabric of reality felt thinner, more permeable, as if the veils between worlds had worn away with the slow, inexorable erosion of ages. Vidar felt this palpable resonance not as a conscious perception, but as a fundamental aspect of his being. It seeped into him with the biting wind, settled in his bones with the permafrost, and pulsed through him with the deep, subterranean thrum of the earth. This land remembered. It remembered the primal stirrings of creation, the raw, unfettered power that had birthed the cosmos, and the ancient, forgotten entities who had walked its nascent landscapes. There were faint traces, subtle whispers, carried on the wind, or etched into the very crystalline structure of the glaciers, that spoke of those who had come before, not merely the fleeting passage of mortal races or the territorial disputes of minor deities, but the presence of beings whose very existence had been woven into the fundamental forces of the realms. These were not memories in the way a mortal might recall a past event, but rather residual energies, imprints left upon the world by beings of immense power and ancient purpose. Vidar, attuned as he was to the subtle language of the North, could sense these echoes. They were like phantom scents on the wind, like the fleeting glimpse of a shape in the corner of his eye, always just beyond the edge of his conscious grasp, yet undeniably present. He had learned to read the land's silent chronicles. The deep fissures in the ancient bedrock were not merely geological accidents, they were scars, traces of cataclysmic events, perhaps even the very moments when the boundaries between realms had been first drawn or when gates between them had been sealed. The glacial ice, a repository of frozen time, held within its depths not just the memory of atmospheric conditions, but the faint psychic residue of those who had once stood upon this very ground. He could sometimes feel a ghost of awe, a flicker of primal fear, or a surge of ancient power that was not his own, but a borrowed sensation from a time when this place had been a nexus of forces beyond mortal comprehension. The silence itself was a sentinel, a vast and knowing entity. It absorbed the cries of the wind, the groans of the ice, the infrequent calls of the few creatures that dared to inhabit these wastes, and held them all in its timeless embrace. But within that silence lay an unfulfilled promise, a constant hum of potential energy, a coiled anticipation of something immense and world altering. It was the silence of a held breath, the pregnant pause before a momentous event. Vidar felt this keenly, a primal awareness that his vigil was not an end, but a prelude. He was the last in a long line, a solitary guardian at the precipice of a change that had been eons in the making. There were days, or perhaps eternities, when the veil between his world and the echoes of the past seemed almost transparent. He would find himself standing on a wind-scoured plateau, and the landscape would shimmer as if viewed through water. For a fleeting instant, he would glimpse not the familiar, stark beauty of the frozen north, but a fleeting vision of what had been, perhaps a celestial being, cloaked in starlight, raising a hand to command the very elements, or a shadowy form emanating an aura of profound antiquity, forging a pact with the primal forces of this land. These were not mere hallucinations, but potent fragments of memory, imprinted onto the very essence of the place, released by some subtle shift in the cosmic currents, or perhaps by the sheer cumulative weight of Vidar's own enduring presence. He had come to understand that the gate he guarded was not a physical structure, but a metaphysical one. It was a point of intersection, a place where the mundane and the extraordinary, the known and the unknowable, converged. The ancient deities who had once communed here, their names now lost to the ages, had recognized its significance. They had imbued it with their power, sealed it with their will, and then, one by one, they had faded, leaving behind only the faintest traces of their passage. Vidar was the inheritor of their vigilance, the custodian of their forgotten legacy. His purpose was to maintain the integrity of that seal, to ensure that what lay beyond the gate remained where it belonged, contained and quiescent. The immensity of his task weighed upon him, not as a burden of despair, but as a profound sense of responsibility. He was a solitary anchor in a sea of shifting cosmic energies. The very land seemed to draw strength from his unwavering watch, its ancient heart beating in rhythm with his own. The auroras, those celestial dancers, were not merely beautiful displays. They were the visible manifestation of the energies that flowed through this place, the cosmic breath that sustained its hidden purpose. He studied their patterns, deciphered their fleeting messages, for he knew that in their vibrant hues lay clues to the ebb and flow of the powers he guarded. Sometimes, in the deepest hours of the northern night, when the world was plunged into an almost absolute stillness, Vidar would feel the ancient memories stir more strongly. He would sense the presence of those who had walked this land when the stars were young and the earth was still cooling from the fires of its birth. They were not malevolent spirits, nor benevolent guides, but simply was. Their existence was a foundational truth of this realm, and their power, though dormant, was still a palpable force. He could feel their ancient wisdom seeping into him, not as knowledge imparted, but as a resonance, a fundamental understanding of the vast cosmic currents that shaped existence. The sheer duration of his watch was a concept that transcended mortal comprehension. He had seen glaciers advance and retreat, mountains rise and crumble, entire ecosystems bloom and wither, all within the span of his solitary vigil. And yet, for all the change he had witnessed, the fundamental purpose of his watch remained unaltered. The gate was still sealed, the primordial forces still contained. He was a living monument to an ancient promise, a testament to the enduring power of commitment, even in the face of unimaginable solitude and the relentless march of time. He was acutely aware that the world had largely forgotten the significance of this place, if it had ever known it at all. The gods in their bustling realms, the mortals in their fleeting lives, were concerned with their own immediate concerns, their own grand dramas. They were oblivious to the silent, eternal watch being kept in the desolate north, and that was as it should be. His purpose was not to be seen or acknowledged, but to simply be the guardian, the unwavering sentinel. The silence of his watch was a shield, protecting a world that did not even know it was in peril. The residual energies of the ancient deities were a constant, subtle presence. It was as if their spirits had infused themselves into the very stone and ice, their essence a permanent part of the land's soul. He could feel their ancient wisdom, their vast understanding of the cosmic order, even if their individual identities were lost to the mists of time. They had laid the foundations for his vigil, and in doing so, they had entrusted him with a responsibility of immeasurable weight. He was the inheritor of their foresight, the keeper of their deepest secrets. The land itself seemed to respond to his presence, to acknowledge his enduring watch. The biting winds carried his scent across the desolate plains. The snowfalls sculpted his footprints into temporary monuments, and the very earth seemed to vibrate with a subtle recognition of his purpose. He was a part of the land, and the land was a part of him, an indivisible whole bound by the silent covenant of ages. The unfulfilled promise held within the silence was not a threat, but a testament to the inherent power of this place, a power that Vidar was sworn to contain, and in containing, to preserve the delicate balance of the realms. His connection to the land was more than just environmental, it was deeply spiritual. He felt the slumbering power within the earth, the vast, untapped potential that lay dormant beneath layers of permafrost and ancient ice. This was not the crude, physical strength of a titan, but a subtle, pervasive energy, a force that permeated every atom of his being. It was the echo of creation, the raw material from which all things were born, and it was this primal force that he and those who had stood here before him were sworn to protect. The auroras, in their dazzling, ephemeral dance were like a visual symphony, a celestial choir singing the songs of the ancient ones. Vidar would watch them for what felt like eternities, his mind attuned to their silent language. He saw in their shifting patterns not just the interplay of solar winds and atmospheric gases, but the very pulse of the cosmic energies that the gate contained. They were a constant reminder of what lay beyond, of the vast, untamed forces that slumbered in the heart of the North, waiting for the moment of their release. He had inherited not just a duty, but a perspective that was profoundly different from that of the gods or mortals. Their concerns were immediate, their understanding often limited by their own transient existence. Vidar, however, existed on a timescale that was more akin to the slow, geological processes of the earth. He understood that the grand dramas of Asgard, the petty squabbles of the divine pantheon, were but fleeting moments in the vast, unfolding narrative of the cosmos. His focus was on the fundamental forces, the ancient powers, the hidden truths that underpinned reality itself. The silence was his sanctuary and his burden. It was the space where he could commune with the echoes of the past, where he could feel the latent power of the land, and where he could prepare for whatever the future might bring. He was the solitary watchman, the eternal sentinel, and his purpose, etched into his very soul by the weight of ages, was to ensure that the ancient gate remained sealed, that the echoes of primordial power remained contained, and that the silence of the North continued its vigil, unbroken and eternal. The land remembered, and Vidar remembered its memory. His presence was a constant affirmation of that ancient pact, a living testament to a duty that transcended time and mortality. The land was his witness, and his silence was its unwavering testament. The profound stillness that had defined Vidar's existence for untold ages was not a void, but a carefully maintained equilibrium. It was a silence that had been meticulously cultivated, a testament to the enduring vigilance of his lineage, and now his own solitary watch. He was a linchpin, an immovable object at the nexus of cosmic currents, his very being interwoven with the ancient pact that kept the primal forces at bay. The land, a vast canvas of ice and stone, was his sanctuary and his prison, a testament to a duty that transcended the ephemeral concerns of gods and mortals. He was the guardian of a forgotten threshold, the silent custodian of a slumbering power, and his watch was as eternal as the stars. He had learned to read the language of this desolate realm, to decipher the subtle nuances that spoke of shifts in the cosmic tapestry. The groan of ancient glaciers was not merely the sound of ice, responding to subtle temperature fluctuations. It was a deeper lament, a resonant echo of the immense pressures that bore down upon the very fabric of reality. The biting wind, a constant companion, carried whispers not of mortal tales, but of ancient stirrings, of forces that had lain dormant for millennia, now beginning to flex their immense power. Vidar's senses, honed by an eternity of focused observation, registered these shifts with an acuity that bordered on the prescient. This was not a sudden intrusion, no cataclysmic eruption that would shatter the stillness with a deafening roar. Instead, it was a subtle unraveling, a gradual erosion of the established order. The silence was not being broken, it was being altered. It was a change so profound, so fundamental, that it could only be perceived by one attuned to the deepest rhythms of existence. Vidar felt it in the very marrow of his bones. a low, pervasive thrum that resonated not from the surface of the earth, but from its very core. It began as a tremor, almost imperceptible, beneath the vast expanse of the sea of ice. It was a vibration that did not originate from the tectonic plates, nor from the slow grind of glacial movement, but from something far more ancient, far more powerful. It was the deep, guttural sigh of a slumbering entity, the first stirrings of a force that had been bound, contained, and forgotten by all but the most ancient of records. The world serpent, Jormungandr, a creature whose very existence was an affront to the ordered cosmos, was beginning to awaken. The frost that coated the land, usually a testament to its frozen stillness, seemed to react. It shivered, not with the chill of the north wind, but with an internal agitation, as if the very ice crystals were vibrating with an unseen energy. The snowpack, a pristine blanket of white, appeared to ripple in places, as if the land itself was recoiling from the subterranean disturbance. Vidar stood on a windswept ridge, his gaze fixed on the seemingly immutable horizon, yet his awareness was focused inward on the subtle symphony of discord that was beginning to play out across the frozen wastes. Then, the celestial realm began to betray the growing unease. The stars, those distant, eternal sentinels, seemed to dim. It was not a gradual fading, but a flicker, a stutter in their ancient luminescence, as if their light was being challenged, drawn away by an unseen gravitational maw. The auroras, those ethereal dancers of the polar sky, which usually painted the heavens with their vibrant hues, seemed to recede, their brilliant tendrils of light growing pallid as if their energy was being siphoned off, consumed by the encroaching darkness. Vidar understood the significance of these subtle shifts. The dimming stars, the faltering auroras, these were not natural phenomena. They were indicators, cosmic tremors that signaled a fundamental disruption in the universal balance. The ancient pact, the seal that bound Jormungandr, was weakening. The very forces that held the world serpent in its primordial slumber were being tested, strained, and perhaps irrevocably compromised. He had anticipated this. The echoes of the past, the residual energies of the ancient deities who had first forged the seal, had carried a faint, persistent warning. It was a prophecy woven into the very essence of the land, a whisper of a time when the serpent's chains would fray, when the world would once again face the terror of its uncoiling. Vidar, as the last sentinel, was the sole witness to this encroaching doom, the only one attuned to the subtle, terrifying song of the world's undoing. The low rumble beneath the sea of ice intensified, no longer a subtle thrum, but a palpable vibration that resonated through the frozen crust. It was the sound of colossal power stirring, of a coiled immensity preparing to uncoil. The very air grew heavy, charged with an unseen energy, and the wind, which had always carried the scent of ice and solitude, now seemed to carry an undertone of something ancient and primal, something that spoke of the abyss. Vidar closed his eyes, his senses reaching out, delving deeper into the earth's secrets. He could feel the vast, serpentine coils stirring in their eternal prison. The millennia had not dulled its power, nor had its confinement diminished its hunger. It was a creature of pure chaos, an embodiment of the destructive forces that lurked at the edges of creation, and its awakening would spell an end to the fragile order of the realms. He felt the familiar chill of the north, the biting cold that had been his constant companion, but now it was laced with a new, unsettling intensity. It was the cold of the void, the frigid breath of a primordial entity that had been held at bay for eons. The light of the stars, flickering and uncertain, offered little solace. They were distant, pale reflections of a cosmic order that was itself beginning to buckle under the strain. This was not a battle to be fought with blade or shield. Vidar's strength lay not in martial prowess, but in his connection to the land, in his deep understanding of the ancient forces at play. He was the anchor, the living embodiment of the seal, and his task was to maintain his vigil, to reinforce the weakening bonds, and to resist the inevitable surge of chaos. The silence of the North, once a testament to his unwavering watch, was now a fragile membrane, stretched taut on the verge of tearing. The subtle shifts, the ominous tremors, the dimming of the celestial lights, these were the first cracks in that membrane, the initial signs that the storm was indeed coming, and Vidar, the solitary watchman, was the only one prepared to face the tempest. He stood as the last bulwark against the encroaching darkness, his resolve as unyielding as the ancient ice that surrounded him, his gaze fixed on the horizon, anticipating the inevitable unfolding of a destiny that had been written in the stars themselves, a destiny now threatened by the primal stirrings from the depths of the world. He could feel the ancient magic of the seal straining, the colossal pressure exerted by the waking serpent, and he knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the very soul, that his eternal vigil was about to be tested as never before. The world was changing, and only he was truly watching, a lone sentinel at the precipice of an unfolding apocalypse. The profound stillness that had defined Vidar's existence for untold ages was not a void, but a carefully maintained equilibrium. It was a silence that had been meticulously cultivated, a testament to the enduring vigilance of his lineage. And now, his own solitary watch, he was a linchpin, an immovable object at the nexus of cosmic currents, his very being interwoven with the ancient pact that kept the primal forces at bay. The land, a vast canvas of ice and stone, was his sanctuary and his prison, a testament to a duty that transcended the ephemeral concerns of gods and mortals. He was the guardian of a forgotten threshold, the silent custodian of a slumbering power, and his watch was as eternal as the stars. He had learned to read the language of this desolate realm, to decipher the subtle nuances that spoke of shifts in the cosmic tapestry. The groan of ancient glaciers was not merely the sound of ice responding to subtle temperature fluctuations. It was a deeper lament, a resonant echo of the immense pressures that bore down upon the very fabric of reality. The biting wind, a constant companion, carried whispers not of mortal tales, but of ancient stirrings, of forces that had lain dormant for millennia, now beginning to flex their immense power. Vidar's senses, honed by an eternity of focused observation, registered these shifts with an acuity that bordered on the prescient. This was not a sudden intrusion, no cataclysmic eruption that would shatter the stillness with a deafening roar. Instead, it was a subtle unraveling, a gradual erosion of the established order. The silence was not being broken, it was being altered. It was a change so profound, so fundamental, that it could only be perceived by one attuned to the deepest rhythms of existence. Vidar felt it in the very marrow of his bones, a low, pervasive thrum that resonated not from the surface of the earth, but from its very core. It began as a tremor, almost imperceptible, beneath the vast expanse of the sea of ice. It was a vibration that did not originate from the tectonic plates, nor from the slow grind of glacial movement, but from something far more ancient, far more powerful. It was the deep, guttural sigh of a slumbering entity, the first stirrings of a force that had been bound, contained, and forgotten by all but the most ancient of records. The world serpent, Jormungandr, a creature whose very existence was an affront to the ordered cosmos, was beginning to awaken. The frost that coated the land, usually a testament to its frozen stillness, seemed to react. It shivered, not with the chill of the north wind, but with an internal agitation, as if the very ice crystals were vibrating with an unseen energy. The snowpack, a pristine blanket of white, appeared to ripple in places, as if the land itself was recoiling from the subterranean disturbance. Vidar stood on a windswept ridge, his gaze fixed on the seemingly immutable horizon, yet his awareness was focused inward on the subtle symphony of discord that was beginning to play out across the frozen wastes. Then, the celestial realm began to betray the growing unease. The stars, those distant, eternal sentinels, seemed to dim. It was not a gradual fading, but a flicker, a stutter in their ancient luminescence, as if their light was being challenged, drawn away by an unseen gravitational maw. The auroras, those ethereal dancers of the polar sky, which usually painted the heavens with their vibrant hues, seemed to recede, their brilliant tendrils of light growing pallid, as if their energy was being siphoned off, consumed by the encroaching darkness. Vidar understood the significance of these subtle shifts. The dimming stars, the faltering auroras, these were not natural phenomena. They were indicators, cosmic tremors that signaled a fundamental disruption in the universal balance. The ancient pact, the seal that bound Jormungandr, was weakening. The very forces that held the world serpent in its primordial slumber were being tested, strained, and perhaps irrevocably compromised. He had anticipated this. The echoes of the past, the residual energies of the ancient deities who had first forged the seal, had carried a faint, persistent warning. It was a prophecy woven into the very essence of the land, a whisper of a time when the serpent's chains would fray, when the world would once again face the terror of its uncoiling. Vidar, as the last sentinel, was the sole witness to this encroaching doom, the only one attuned to the subtle, terrifying song of the world's undoing. The low rumble beneath the sea of ice intensified, no longer a subtle thrum, but a palpable vibration that resonated through the frozen crust. It was the sound of colossal power stirring, of a coiled immensity preparing to uncoil. The very air grew heavy, charged with an unseen energy, and the wind, which had always carried the scent of ice and solitude, now seemed to carry an undertone of something ancient and primal, something that spoke of the abyss. Vidar closed his eyes, his senses reaching out, delving deeper into the earth's secrets. He could feel the vast, serpentine coils stirring in their eternal prison. The millennia had not dulled its power, nor had its confinement diminished its hunger. It was a creature of pure chaos, an embodiment of the destructive forces that lurked at the edges of creation, and its awakening would spell an end to the fragile order of the realms. He felt the familiar chill of the north, the biting cold that had been his constant companion, but now it was laced with a new, unsettling intensity. It was the cold of the void, the frigid breath of a primordial entity that had been held at bay for eons. The light of the stars, flickering and uncertain, offered little solace. They were distant, pale reflections of a cosmic order that was itself beginning to buckle under the strain. This was not a battle to be fought with blade or shield. Vidar's strength lay not in martial prowess, but in his connection to the land, in his deep understanding of the ancient forces at play. He was the anchor, the living embodiment of the seal, and his task was to maintain his vigil, to reinforce the weakening bonds, and to resist the inevitable surge of chaos. The silence of the north, once a testament to his unwavering watch, was now a fragile membrane stretched taut on the verge of tearing. The subtle shifts, the ominous tremors, the dimming of the celestial lights, these were the first cracks in that membrane, the initial signs that the storm was indeed coming, and Vidar, the solitary watchman, was the only one prepared to face the tempest. He stood as the last bulwark against the encroaching darkness, his resolve as unyielding as the ancient ice that surrounded him, his gaze fixed on the horizon, anticipating the inevitable unfolding of a destiny that had been written in the stars themselves, a destiny now threatened by the primal stirrings from the depths of the world. He could feel the ancient magic of the seal straining, the colossal pressure exerted by the waking serpent, and he knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the very soul, that his eternal vigil was about to be tested as never before. The world was changing, and only he was truly watching, a lone sentinel at the precipice of an unfolding apocalypse. The deep, resonant vibration beneath the sea of ice intensified, no longer a mere tremor that could be dismissed as the shifting of ancient glaciers or the groan of the earth's core adjusting. This was a visceral thrumming, a palpable force that Vidar felt not just in his bones, but in the very essence of his being. It was a sound that spoke of unfathomable mass, of coiled power, awakening from a slumber so profound it had transcended memory, becoming myth, then fading into oblivion for all but the most ancient, the most vigilant. Jormungandr, the world's serpent, stirred, and the very foundations of the world trembled with its nascent, terrifying energy. The vast, seemingly immutable expanse of the sea of ice, which had been the silent witness to Vidar's watch for millennia, began to betray the growing unrest from below. The uniform, crystalline surface, usually as placid and unbroken as a mirror reflecting the stoic heavens, started to show signs of distress, almost imperceptibly at first. Like a spiderweb spun across the ice, fine cracks began to web outwards from unseen points of origin deep beneath the frozen waters. These were not the superficial fractures caused by temperature shifts, but deep fissures that seemed to emanate from the very heart of the world. Then, from these newly formed fissures, plumes of steam began to rise, unnaturally warm against the biting, frigid air. The steam was not the ethereal mist of a geyser. It was thick, billowing, and carried with it a scent that was both ancient and alien, a smell that spoke of geothermal activity far beyond anything natural, hinting at the immense, coiled power that lay dormant and was now beginning to stir. The sea, once a solid, frozen testament to the enduring cold of the north, was being disturbed from its eternal stasis by a force that warped the very elements, a force that was the harbinger of Ragnarok, the twilight of the gods. Vidar watched, his breath misting in the frigid air, his senses keenly attuned to the unfolding spectacle. The natural order, the predictable rhythm of the frozen north, was visibly disrupted. The ice, a substance that had always represented permanence and stillness in his long existence, was now a canvas upon which the primordial forces of chaos were painting their terrifying reawakening. He could feel the immense pressure building, the slow, inexorable uncoiling of a power that had been contained by ancient magic and the sheer weight of ages. The world was not merely experiencing a disturbance, it was undergoing a fundamental shift, a tremor that originated from the deepest, darkest wellspring of existence. The cracks widened with an audible, albeit muffled, groan, each expansion a testament to the growing might of the serpent. The steam, once wisps, now rose in powerful geysers, the heat emanating from them a stark contrast to the surrounding permafrost. These were not mere thermal vents. They were wounds in the ice, opened by the sheer, unyielding pressure of Jormungandr's awakening form. The ice itself seemed to recoil, to fracture under the immense burden, as if the very mass of the serpent was pressing against its icy confines with an ever-increasing force. Vidar's gaze swept across the vast expanse of the sea of ice. He saw areas where the surface had not merely cracked, but had begun to buckle, creating undulating waves in the solid ice, as if a colossal body were shifting beneath the surface, pushing and contorting the frozen sea. The water beneath, normally a place of frigid stillness, was now agitated, stirred by the movements of the awakening Leviathan. The sounds that reached him were no longer just the groans of ice, but a deep, guttural churning, the sound of immense scales scraping against ancient, submerged stone, of vast, unseen muscles flexing after eons of inertia. He felt a profound resonance with these changes, a connection that went beyond mere observation. The ancient pact, the binding magic that held Ormungandr in check, was woven into the very fabric of his existence, into the land he protected. As the serpent stirred, the energies that sustained the seal flowed through him, and he felt the strain, the immense power that was being exerted against the weakened bonds. It was like feeling a titanic force trying to tear apart the very threads that held reality together, and he was at the epicenter of that struggle. The air grew heavy, charged with a palpable energy, an aura of primal dread that had been absent for so long. The wind, which had always been a carrier of the clean, sharp scent of frost and snow, now seemed to carry an undercurrent of something far more ancient, a scent of brine and decay, of deep, unfathomable waters, and the primordial forces that dwelled within them. It was the scent of the abyss, of the primal chaos that Jormungandr embodied, now beginning to permeate the world. The celestial signs Vidar had observed earlier, the dimming stars, the flickering auroras, were no longer isolated anomalies. They were reflections of the cosmic disequilibrium caused by the serpent's awakening. The very heavens seemed to respond to the upheaval below, the stars paling as if their light were being absorbed by the growing darkness emanating from the deep. The auroras, once vibrant and dynamic, now pulsed with a sickly, diminished light, their ethereal dance faltering under the encroaching shadow. He knew that these were not merely portents. They were symptoms of a fundamental unraveling. The seal was not just weakening, it was actively being challenged, its power being eroded by the sheer, indomitable will of the world serpent. This was not a slow decay, it was a violent struggle, and the consequences of its failure would be catastrophic. The ancient prophecies, once whispers in the wind, were now becoming a deafening roar, heralding the onset of a new age, an age of destruction and rebirth, dictated by the uncoiling of the great serpent. Vidar drew a deep, bracing breath, the icy air stinging his lungs. He was the last guardian, the sentinel charged with maintaining the integrity of the seal. His existence was a testament to the desperate measures taken by the ancient deities to contain this primordial threat. Now, with the serpent stirring, his role was no longer one of passive vigilance, but of active resistance. He had to reinforce the weakening bonds, to channel his own essence into the failing magic, to become a living bulwark against the encroaching chaos. He looked out at the sea of ice, at the steaming fissures and the buckling ice floes, at the vast, unseen power that was beginning to manifest its presence in the physical world. The sounds of its awakening were a symphony of destruction, a prelude to the final battle. He felt the immense weight of his duty, the burden of safeguarding a world that was largely ignorant of the peril it faced. The time for silent watch was over. The serpent's slumber had ended, and with it, the world's precarious peace. The unraveling had begun, and Vidar stood at the precipice, ready to meet the coming storm. He could feel the primal energy resonating through the earth, a low hum that vibrated in his very soul. This was the song of Jormungandr, a melody of chaos and destruction, and it was growing louder with every passing moment. The sea ice, a once solid barrier, was now a fragile shell, a mere suggestion of the immense power struggling to break free. The cracks were widening, and from them seeped not just steam, but an aura of primal energy, a force that warped the very air, making it heavy and charged. It was the breath of a world serpent, exhaled after an aeon of stillness, and it carried the scent of the primordial abyss. The vast, seemingly unyielding plains of ice were beginning to ripple, not with the gentle undulations of wind-blown snow, but with deep, internal movements. Great fissures, like lightning scars etched onto the frozen canvas, snaked across the surface, revealing glimpses of the churning darkness beneath. The temperature, already frigid, seemed to drop further, a profound, bone-chilling cold that seeped not from the atmosphere, but from the very earth itself. This was the cold of the void, the frigid breath of Jormungandr, a chill that promised not the clarity of ice, but the suffocating embrace of oblivion. Vidar felt the pressure building, an immense, unseen force pushing against the ancient wards. The magic that bound the serpent was a network of cosmic sinews, woven from the very essence of the world's creation, and he could feel those sinews straining, fraying under the immense pressure. It was as if the world itself was groaning under the weight of Jormungandr's awakening, the tectonic plates shifting not by natural forces, but by the convulsive movements of a colossal, serpentine body. He could sense the serpent's awareness sharpening, its consciousness, dormant for so long, now beginning to focus. It was a primal awareness, devoid of the complexities of mortal or even divine thought, a pure, instinctual hunger and a deep-seated hatred for the ordered cosmos that had confined it. Its awakening was not a gentle stir, but a violent struggle, a cosmic battle being waged beneath the frozen seas, the outcome of which would decide the fate of all realms. The plumes of steam rising from the fissures were not merely water vapor, they were imbued with a strange energy, a heat that defied the surrounding frost, and they swirled and danced in the air, their movements mirroring the restless coils of the serpent below. It was as if the serpent's very breath was escaping its prison, a visible manifestation of its burgeoning power. The ice around these fissures was not melting, it was being transformed. The water molecules vibrating with an unnatural energy, creating a luminous haze that shimmered with an otherworldly light. Vidar's mind, honed by centuries of solitude and focused vigilance, grappled with the magnitude of the event. He had prepared for this, had studied the ancient texts, had felt the subtle shifts that hinted at the inevitable. Yet, the visceral reality of Jormungandr's awakening was far more profound, far more terrifying than any prophecy could convey. The sheer scale of the power being unleashed was overwhelming, a testament to the primal forces that existed before the gods, before order, before creation itself. He could feel the subtle currents of magic shifting, the ancient channels that flowed through the land, carrying the energies of the seal now being disrupted, diverted, and even consumed by the serpent's surging power. It was a cosmic hemorrhage, and he was the sole physician tasked with stemming the flow, with reinforcing the weakening structure of the seal. His own energy, intrinsically linked to the land and the ancient pact, was being drawn upon, a constant, draining expenditure to maintain the fragile equilibrium. The silence of the north, once a comforting blanket of absolute stillness, was now a tense, pregnant quiet, punctuated by the growing rumble and the hiss of escaping steam. It was the silence of anticipation, of a world holding its breath before the cataclysm. The stars, which had always been his silent companions, now seemed distant and indifferent, their light too feeble to penetrate the growing darkness emanating from the depths. The auroras, once vibrant and awe-inspiring, had receded to a faint, spectral glow, as if even they were intimidated by the raw, untamed power awakening below. He imagined the serpent's colossal form, its scales like mountains of obsidian, its eyes burning with the fires of the abyss, its movements slow and deliberate as it tested the boundaries of its prison. The sea of ice was but a thin veil, a fragile membrane separating the ordered realms from the chaotic entity that sought to consume them. And that veil was beginning to tear. The very air crackled with latent energy, a tangible testament to the immense power that was being unleashed. It was the prelude to Ragnarok, the twilight of the gods, and the uncoiling of Jormungandr was its overture. Vidar, the last sentinel, stood his ground, his resolve a solitary flame against the encroaching darkness, ready to face the inevitable. The celestial vault, a canvas usually etched with the unwavering luminescence of distant suns, began to betray the same disquiet that racked the frozen earth. Vidar, whose gaze had been drawn to the groaning ice and the steaming fissures, found his attention inevitably pulled upwards. The stars, those ancient, immutable beacons that had marked the passage of millennia, now seemed to falter. It was not a gradual fading, as one might expect from the slow death of a star, but a flickering, a stutter in their ancient glow, as if an unseen hand was momentarily snuffing their light or drawing their essence into some vast cosmic maw. Some stars, brighter than others, seemed to pulse with a frantic, irregular rhythm, their steady brilliance replaced by an anxious tremor, mirroring the seismic unease that emanated from the depths of the world. Then, as if responding to the distress signals from below, the ravens began to gather, not the lone scavengers or the scattered flocks Vidar had sometimes seen against the stark white of the sky, but a multitude. They descended from the unseen upper reaches of the atmosphere in a swirling, ebony tide, their wings beaten with a frantic, almost desperate urgency. These were no ordinary birds. They were Hugin and Munin, the thought and memory of Odin, his eyes and ears across the 9 realms, and their presence here, in such numbers, was an omen of profound significance. They circled Vidar's desolate perch, their movements erratic and filled with an uncharacteristic agitation, their guttural croaks a discordant chorus against the rising rumble from beneath the ice. Their usual purpose, to observe and report, seemed to have been overwhelmed by a primal fear, a shared awareness of the encroaching darkness that even the All-Father's wisest familiars could not fully comprehend. They were not just messengers, they were witnesses to the unraveling of the cosmic order, their instinctual dread a palpable reflection of the celestial disarray. The sky above, which had been a stark, clear blue of the highest latitudes, began to transform. It was as if the veil between worlds was thinning, and the raw, untamed energies of creation were bleeding through. Streaks of ethereal green, reminiscent of the fading auroras, began to weave through the darkening blue. But these were different. They were more vivid, more pulsating, carrying an intensity that spoke of raw power, not the gentle dance of solar winds. Interspersed with the green were tendrils of molten gold, not the warm, comforting light of a sunrise, but a harsh, almost aggressive hue that seemed to burn at the edges of Vidar's vision. The combination was breathtaking and terrifying, a cosmic tapestry woven from the dying light of distant stars and the nascent, chaotic energy of Jormungandr's awakening. It was a spectacle of cosmic upheaval, a visual manifestation of the forces that were now at war, the ordered light of the heavens struggling against the encroaching shadow of primordial chaos. These were not merely decorative lights, nor were they phenomena that could be explained by atmospheric conditions or the predictable cycles of celestial bodies. Vidar recognized them for what they were, harbingers of immense, world-altering change. The very fabric of the heavens was reacting to the disturbance in the deep, a cosmic echo of the primal forces stirring beneath the ice. The dimming stars were like the fading pulse of a weakening seal, the frantic flight of the ravens, a testament to the imminent collapse of ancient pacts, and the igniting sky, a visceral representation of the raw, untamed power that was about to be unleashed. The delicate balance that had held the realms in equilibrium for so long was shattering, and the heavens themselves were weeping tears of light and shadow, of fading brilliance and growing darkness. The air grew perceptibly colder, not with the familiar, clean chill of the Arctic, but with a profound, desiccating cold that seemed to draw the warmth not just from his skin, but from his very soul. It was the cold of the void, the frigid breath exhaled by an entity that had existed before light and warmth, an entity that was now stirring from a slumber that had spanned the ages. This was the touch of Jormungandr, a chill that promised not the clarity and purity of ice, but the suffocating, all consuming embrace of oblivion. The frost that clung to his cloak and beard seemed to deepen in color, taking on a grayer, more lifeless hue, as if the very essence of winter was being corrupted by the primal chill of the abyss. He could feel the shifting currents of magic, the intricate, invisible threads that bound the realms together, now being strained, frayed, and even severed. The ancient wards, imbued with the power of gods and the foundational magic of creation, were groaning under an unprecedented assault. It was a struggle playing out on a cosmic scale, and Vidar, as the last sentinel, was at the nexus of this conflict, his own life force inextricably linked to the integrity of the failing seal. The magic that flowed through him, the very essence of his being, felt like a river fighting against a titanic dam that was beginning to crumble. He could feel the immense pressure building, the inexorable push of the serpent's awakening form, a pressure that was not just physical, but metaphysical, threatening to unravel the very fabric of existence. The ravens continued their frantic circling, their cries growing more desperate, more mournful. They were the omens made manifest, the feathered harbingers of doom, and their presence was a stark reminder of the ancient prophecies that spoke of this very time, the twilight of the gods, the culmination of the primal struggle. Hugin and Munin, whose ceaseless vigilance had provided Odin with insight into the workings of the cosmos, now seemed to be broadcasting only fear and desolation. Their thought and memory were filled with the terrifying reality of Jormungandr's growing power, a reality that was now seeping into the celestial realm, distorting its ordered beauty into a canvas of cosmic chaos. Vidar's gaze swept across the sky, taking in the full spectacle of this celestial distress. The vibrant greens and golds were now intermingling, creating swirling patterns of light that seemed to writhe and coil like the serpent itself. The stars, still flickering, were being swallowed by this encroaching luminescence, their ancient light dimmed not by distance, but by the overwhelming power that was emerging from the deep. It was a breathtaking, terrifying display, a testament to the raw, untamed forces that had been bound for eons and were now, at last, beginning to break free. The heavens were not merely reflecting the turmoil below, they were actively participating in it, their once serene expanse now a battlefield of light and shadow, a cosmic prelude to the storm that was gathering over the world. He could feel the subtle shifts in the magical currents that permeated the land, the channels through which the ancient power flowed, now being disrupted, rerouted, or even consumed by the surging might of Jormungandr. It was like witnessing a cosmic hemorrhage, and he, the solitary guardian, was tasked with stemming the tide, with reinforcing the weakening structure of the seal. His own energy, inextricably tied to the land and the ancient pact, was being drawn upon, a constant, draining expenditure to maintain the fragile equilibrium. It was a battle waged not with steel or spell, but with sheer will and an intimate connection to the primal forces of creation. The silence of the North, which had always been a comforting blanket of absolute stillness, was now a tense, pregnant quiet, punctuated by the growing rumble from below and the frenzied cries of the ravens. It was the silence of anticipation, of a world holding its breath before the inevitable cataclysm. The stars, his silent companions for so long, now seemed distant and indifferent, their light too feeble to penetrate the encroaching darkness emanating from the earth. The auroras, once vibrant and awe-inspiring, had receded to a faint, spectral glow, as if even they were intimidated by the raw, untamed power awakening beneath the ice. He could almost visualize the serpent's colossal form, its scales like mountains of obsidian, its eyes burning with the fires of the abyss, its movements slow and deliberate as it tested the boundaries of its prison. The sea of ice was but a thin veil, a fragile membrane separating the ordered realms from the chaotic entity that sought to consume them, and that veil was beginning to tear. The very air crackled with a latent energy, a tangible testament to the immense power that was being unleashed. It was the prelude to Ragnarok, the twilight of the gods, and the uncoiling of Jormungandr was its overture. Vidar, the last sentinel, stood his ground, his resolve a solitary flame against the encroaching darkness, ready to face the inevitable. He could feel the primal energy resonating through the earth, a low hum that vibrated in his very soul. This was the song of Jormungandr, a melody of chaos and destruction, and it was growing louder with every passing moment. The sea ice, a once solid barrier, was now a fragile shell, a mere suggestion of the immense power struggling to break free. The cracks were widening, and from them seeped not just steam, but an aura of primal energy, a force that warped the very air, making it heavy and charged. It was the breath of a world serpent, exhaled after an aeon of stillness, and it carried the scent of the primordial abyss. The vast, seemingly unyielding plains of ice were beginning to ripple, not with the gentle undulations of wind-blown snow, but with deep, internal movements. Great fissures, like lightning scars etched onto the frozen canvas, snaked across the surface, revealing glimpses of the churning darkness beneath. The temperature, already frigid, seemed to drop further, a profound, bone-chilling cold that seeped not from the atmosphere, but from the very earth itself. This was the cold of the void, the frigid breath of Jormungandr, a chill that promised not the clarity of ice, but the suffocating embrace of oblivion. Vidar felt the pressure building, an immense, unseen force pushing against the ancient wards. The magic that bound the serpent was a network of cosmic sinews, woven from the very essence of the world's creation, and he could feel those sinews straining, fraying under the immense pressure. It was as if the world itself was groaning under the weight of Jormungandr's awakening, the tectonic plates shifting not by natural forces, but by the convulsive movements of a colossal, serpentine body. He could sense the serpent's awareness sharpening, its consciousness, dormant for so long, now beginning to focus. It was a primal awareness, devoid of the complexities of mortal or even divine thought, a pure, instinctual hunger and a deep-seated hatred for the ordered cosmos that had confined it. Its awakening was not a gentle stir, but a violent struggle, a cosmic battle being waged beneath the frozen seas, the outcome of which would decide the fate of all realms. The ravens, swirling vortex of dark wings against the increasingly tumultuous sky, seemed to be the only creatures brave enough, or perhaps foolish enough, to witness this cataclysm from such proximity. They squawked and cawed, their voices strained with an animalistic terror, their very forms appearing to shimmer and distort in the unnatural light that now permeated the atmosphere. Hugin and Munin, the conduits of Odin's knowledge, were now conduits of primal fear. their ancient instincts screaming a dire warning that transcended any mere earthly observation. Their flight patterns, usually indicative of precise observations and swift communication, were now a frantic ballet of desperation, as if the very concept of coherent thought was being fractured by the magnitude of the unfolding event. Vidar watched them, feeling a kinship with their heightened state of alert, for he too felt the encroaching chaos threatening to unravel his own carefully maintained sanity. The celestial phenomena were not merely lights, they were tears in the fabric of reality, bleeding the primal energies of the deep into the sky, and the ravens were the first to bear witness to this terrifying transformation. The gold streaks intensified, burning with an almost solar ferocity, while the greens pulsed with a luminescence that seemed to emanate from within the very bones of the world. It was a symphony of destruction played out across the heavens, and Vidar stood as the sole, unwilling conductor, his existence inextricably bound to the unraveling of the cosmos. The ancient pact, once a shield, was now a fragile membrane, and the world serpent was a relentless force tearing it asunder. The very stars seemed to dim in their presence, as if recoiling from the sheer, unadulterated power that was being unleashed. The light of distant galaxies seemed to bend and warp, drawn into the swirling vortex of cosmic disturbance, a testament to the gravitational pull of a force that was as ancient as existence itself, and as terrifying as the end of all things. The roiling heavens, a canvas of cosmic distress, had served as Vidar's first chilling premonition. The dimming stars, the frantic dance of the ravens, the searing streaks of celestial fire, they were not merely passive observers of the world's unrest, but active participants in its unraveling. The whispers of the wind, once carrying the sharp, clean scent of Arctic air, now carried a metallic tang, a hint of ozone, and something far older, far more primal. It was the breath of the abyss, exhaled through the fractured seals, and it called to something deep within Vidar's own ancient lineage. His gaze, previously fixed upon the groaning ice and the steaming fissures that betrayed the serpent's restless turning beneath, now drifted downwards towards the jagged, formidable cliffs that plunged into the unforgiving ice-choked sea. For eons, his vigil had been bound to this desolate expanse, a solitary sentinel against the encroaching chaos. But the celestial alarm, coupled with the earth's ever-increasing lament, signaled a shift. The time for passive guardianship was over. A more active, more desperate measure was required. He began his descent, a slow, deliberate movement against the sheer face of the glacial precipice. The snow, which had always provided a treacherous but navigable path, now seemed to conspire against him. It was deeper, heavier, clinging to his boots with a clinging, suffocating tenacity. Each step was a battle, a constant push against an unseen resistance. The very rock beneath his fingers, usually cold and unyielding, now seemed to radiate a subtle warmth, a faint, almost imperceptible pulse that mirrored the earth's internal tremors. It was as if the land itself was waking, its ancient heart beating with a frantic, irregular rhythm. The runes, etched into the cliff face by the hands of forgotten gods, were his only guide. They were massive, weathered by millennia of wind and ice, their once vivid lines now softened, blurred, half obscured by blankets of snow and the creeping tendrils of glacial frost. These were not mere decorations. They were glyphs of binding, ancient sigils of containment that had held the world serpent in its icy slumber. Vidar traced them with a gloved hand, his fingers following the familiar contours, feeling the residual power that still thrummed within their stone hearts. They were a testament to the immense forces that had been at play in the world's genesis, and their current state of decay was a stark reminder of the encroaching darkness. The air around him grew heavy, charged with a palpable energy that made the hairs on his arms stand on end. It was not the chaotic energy of the celestial display above, but something more focused, more potent, a deep, resonant hum that seemed to emanate from the very core of the earth. This was the Forgotten Gate, the nexus point where the ancient wards were weakest, where the veil between worlds was thinnest. It was a place of immense power, a threshold that had been sealed for ages, a testament to the titanic struggle that had shaped the Nine Realms. The very atmosphere around it seemed to vibrate, a low, resonant frequency that sang of dormant might. This was not the benign hum of nature, but the thrum of a captive god, a titanic entity yearning for release. Vidar felt it resonate within his own bones, a primal frequency that echoed the ancient pacts that bound him to this place. The path twisted and turned, descending deeper into a chasm carved by the relentless erosion of glacial melt and tectonic shifts. The snow gave way to a slick, black ice, reflecting the chaotic light filtering down from the heavens like shattered obsidian. Each step required meticulous care, for a single misstep could send him tumbling into the icy abyss below. Yet, despite the peril, Vidar felt a strange sense of inevitability guiding his descent. He was drawn to this place, to the Forgotten Gate, by an unseen force, a calling as old as time itself. The runes on the cliff face seemed to pulse with a faint inner light as he drew nearer, their power amplified by the proximity of their purpose. They were a tapestry of ancient power, woven from the very fabric of creation, and their glyphs spoke of chains forged in the heart of the cosmos, of bindings that had held back the primordial tide. The closer he got, the more the latent energy intensified. It was a pressure that built in his chest, a weight that settled upon his shoulders, not of physical burden, but of immense, suppressed power. It felt like standing before a sleeping dragon, the air thick with the promise of its awakened fury. The faint warmth he had felt earlier from the cliff face intensified, emanating now from the very ice beneath his feet. This was no mere geological anomaly. It was the residual heat of a cosmic furnace, a testament to the aeons of struggle that had taken place in this very spot. The ice here was different too. It was not the pristine, crystalline ice of the upper glaciers, but a dark, almost crystalline substance, veined with streaks of deep, pulsing blue, like frozen lightning. It was the very essence of the seal, the solidified magic that imprisoned the world serpent. He reached a ledge, a precarious outcropping carved into the side of the chasm. Before him, the chasm opened into a vast, cavernous space, a cathedral of ice and shadow, and there, at its heart, lay the Forgotten Gate. It was not a structure of stone or metal, but a colossal archway formed from the very ice of the glacier, a swirling vortex of frozen energy. The arch itself seemed to writhe with contained power, its surface a kaleidoscope of shifting blues and greens, mirroring the chaotic spectacle in the sky. Within the archway, the darkness was absolute, a void that seemed to swallow light and sound alike. It was a tear in the fabric of reality, a portal to a place that had been deliberately erased from mortal memory, a gate that had been sealed with the blood of gods and the essence of creation. The air here thrummed with an almost unbearable intensity, a deep, resonant chord that vibrated through Vidar's very being. It was the song of the abyss, a melody of chaos and oblivion that had been silenced for millennia, but was now beginning to stir. Ancient runes, far more potent and intricate than those on the cliff face, were carved into the ice arch itself. These were the primary bindings, the core enchantments that had been placed here by the primordial forces of creation to imprison Jormungandr. They glowed with a faint, ethereal light, their power waning, but still immense. Vidar could feel the ancient magic seeping from them, a tangible aura that pushed back against the encroaching darkness of the gate. This was the fulcrum of the cosmic balance, the linchpin that held the realms together, and it was failing. The weight of the world, the burden of ages, pressed down on Vidar as he stood before this threshold, this point of no return. The celestial harbingers, the groaning earth, the frantic cries of the ravens, they were all a testament to the fact that the seal was breaking, that the forgotten gate was opening. He could feel the serpentine presence stirring beyond the veil, a vast, malevolent consciousness awakening from its eons of slumber. It was a hunger that gnawed at the edges of reality, a hatred that burned with the cold fire of the void. The gate was its prison, but it was also its promise, the promise of oblivion, of the end of all things. The very ice of the archway seemed to crackle and groan under the immense pressure, as if the colossal serpent was already pressing against it, testing its strength, yearning for freedom. Vidar's purpose here was clear, yet daunting. He was not here to reseal the gate, for the forces now at play were far beyond his solitary strength. He was here to witness, to understand, and if possible, to delay the inevitable. The Forgotten Gate represented not just a physical location, but a metaphysical threshold, a boundary between the ordered cosmos and the primordial chaos that lurked just beyond. Stepping through it would mean an irreversible commitment, a plunge into the heart of the storm. The runes on the archway, when he looked closely, were not static inscriptions, but seemed to be in a state of flux, their lines flickering and shifting as if struggling against an unseen force. Some of the glyphs, once symbols of immense power, were now dim, their light barely perceptible, while others pulsed with a frenzied energy, their forms distorting as if caught in the titanic struggle between the binding and the bound. This was a battle of cosmic proportions, waged not with weapons of war, but with the very essence of existence, and Vidar stood as the solitary witness to its most critical phase. The air, thick with the hum of power, now carried a chilling whisper, a voice that seemed to emanate from the void within the gate itself. It was a voice that spoke of ancient hungers, of a world that had grown stagnant and ripe for consumption, of a coming darkness that would cleanse and renew. It was the siren song of oblivion, and it sought to lure Vidar, like so many others before him, into the abyss. He knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that he was at the precipice of a transformation, not just for the world, but for himself. The Forgotten Gate was not merely a barrier, it was an invitation. The descent had been perilous, a calculated risk taken against the groaning groans of ice and the ominous whispers from the celestial sphere. Now, Having navigated the treacherous chasm and stood before the flickering remnants of the forgotten gate, Vidar felt a new imperative guiding him. The runes, the ancient glyphs that had once served as the primary bindings, were failing. Their ethereal light sputtered, a dying ember against the encroaching void. He could feel the serpentine consciousness stirring beyond, a vast, malevolent hunger gnawing at the edges of reality. The gate was its prison, but it was also its promise, the promise of oblivion. The very ice of the archway seemed to crackle and groan, as if Jormungandr, the world's serpent, was already pressing against it, testing its strength, yearning for freedom. Vidar's purpose was not to reseal the gate. The forces at play were too immense for his solitary strength. His task was to bear witness, to understand, and to delay the inevitable. The forgotten gate was a metaphysical threshold, a boundary between the ordered cosmos and the primordial chaos that lurked just beyond. Stepping through it would be an irreversible commitment, a plunge into the heart of the storm. The runes themselves seemed to writhe, their lines flickering and shifting, battling an unseen force. Some glyphs were dim, their power nearly extinguished, while others pulsed with frenzied energy, their forms distorting. This was a cosmic battle, waged not with steel, but with the very essence of existence, and Vidar stood as its solitary witness. The air, thick with the hum of power, carried a chilling whisper, a voice from the void. It spoke of ancient hungers, of a world ripe for consumption, of a coming darkness that would cleanse and renew. It was the siren song of oblivion, seeking to lure him into the abyss. He knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that he stood at the precipice of a transformation, not just for the world, but for himself. The Forgotten Gate was not merely a barrier, it was an invitation. The weight of that realization settled upon him, a crushing presence heavier than any avalanche. He could not simply stand and observe. The very fabric of existence was unraveling, and his inaction would be a tacit surrender. The celestial alarm, the tremors in the earth, the weakening of the ancient seals, all pointed to a singular, terrifying truth. The cycle was nearing its catastrophic conclusion. He turned from the pulsating, fractured archway, his gaze sweeping across the cavernous space. While the gate drew the eye with its terrifying spectacle, the surrounding chamber held its own ancient secrets. The ice, once a mere barrier, seemed to have been sculpted by forces far beyond mortal comprehension. Here, in the deeper recesses of the chasm, where the celestial light did not penetrate, a different kind of illumination began to emerge. It was subtle at first, a faint luminescence that seemed to seep from the very rock and ice. Vidar took a tentative step away from the immediate vicinity of the gate, his boots crunching on a fine, crystalline dust that carpeted the floor. The air here was different, still charged with the residual energy of the failing seals, but also carrying a distinct, earthy scent, a stark contrast to the sterile, frigid air of the upper glaciers. It spoke of deep, undisturbed places, of ages before the ice claimed dominion over this land. He found himself drawn towards a section of the cavern wall that shimmered with a soft, verdant glow. As he approached, he realized the source, a dense carpet of phosphorescent moss, clinging to the ice-laden rock like a living tapestry. Its light was cool and ethereal, casting a dancing shadows that played upon the uneven surfaces of the ice. Interspersed within the moss like scattered jewels, were clusters of crystals, their facets catching and amplifying the faint glow, pulsing with a slow, steady rhythm. This was no natural phenomenon. It was a testament to the ancient magic that permeated this place. The moss and crystals seemed to draw their sustenance from the very bedrock, from the deep, primordial energies that flowed beneath the surface of the world. He reached out, his gloved hand brushing against the velvety texture of the moss. A faint warmth, unexpected and profound, pulsed through his fingers. It was a resonance, a connection to something ancient and alive, something that had been slumbering but was now slowly awakening. This was not the chaotic energy of the gate, but a grounding force, a primal strength that spoke of life's persistence, even in the face of a cosmic upheaval. His gaze followed the trail of phosphorescence deeper into the cavern, revealing a network of interconnected tunnels and chambers, each imbued with the same subtle, otherworldly glow. The ice here was not the sheer, unforgiving ice of the precipice, but more ancient, more fractured, revealing glimpses of what lay beneath. And within those glimpses, Vidar saw them: roots, immense, gnarled roots, as thick as ancient trees, snaked their way through the ice and rock, their surfaces etched with swirling patterns that seemed to thrum with a latent power. They were the primordial roots of Yggdrasil, the world tree, or at least fragments of its immense subterranean network, anchoring the realms, reaching down into the very core of existence. The thought sent a shiver down Vidar's spine, a mixture of awe and trepidation. The world tree, the cosmic axis, was a concept spoken of in hushed tones, a foundation of the nine realms whose true extent was known to few. To see even a sliver of its subterranean presence here, in this place of ancient seals and forgotten gates, was to understand the true depth of the forces at play. The air grew thicker, heavier, laden not just with the scent of damp earth and ancient magic, but with a palpable sense of life, albeit life of an ancient, primordial nature. It was the scent of deep roots, of millennia of growth and slumber, of the slow, inexorable pulse of the earth's heart. Vidar felt it resonating within his own being, a deeper hum that aligned with the subtle vibrations of the moss and crystals. This sanctuary, hidden beneath the weight of the glacier and the secrets of the forgotten gate, was not merely a place of containment, but a place of origin, a nexus where the world's deepest energies converged. He moved deeper into the labyrinthine network, the phosphorescent moss and glowing crystals his only guides. The tunnels narrowed and widened, some smooth and polished as if by the passage of countless beings, others rough and hewn, revealing the raw power of their formation. He could feel the presence of the roots growing stronger, the latent energy they exuded becoming more pronounced. It was like walking through the veins of a sleeping giant, each step resonating with its slow, deep pulse. The moss, in particular, seemed to respond to his presence, its glow intensifying as he passed, as if acknowledging him, recognizing the ancient lineage that flowed within him. He came to a chamber of considerable size, its ceiling lost in the shadows above, but its floor and walls illuminated by an even more abundant display of the glowing flora. At the center of this chamber, a massive root, thicker than any he had yet seen, emerged from the earth and curved upwards, disappearing into the unseen heights. Its surface was a tapestry of intricate, spiraling runes, similar to those on the cliff face and the gate. but these seemed to glow with a steady, unwavering light, stark contrast to the flickering decay he had witnessed earlier. This root was not merely a conduit of energy, it was a source, a living embodiment of the world tree's enduring strength. Vidar approached it cautiously, his hand outstretched. As his fingers neared the root, he felt a surge of power, not overwhelming, but like a deep, comforting warmth, a sense of profound connection to the earth and to the ancient pacts that bound the realms. The runes on the root's surface began to shift, their forms rippling like water, as if reacting to his touch, to his presence. He could feel ancient memories stirring within him, echoes of a time when such connections were commonplace, when the boundaries between worlds were more fluid, and the whispers of the world tree were heard by all who were attuned. He realized then that this sanctuary was more than just a hidden temple. It was a vital artery of the world's lifeblood, a place where the essence of Yggdrasil remained untainted by the encroaching chaos. The failing seals at the forgotten gate were a symptom of a deeper malaise, a weakening of the world's core strength. This chamber, this confluence of primordial energy, was a counterpoint to that decay, a bastion of resilience. The air in the chamber hummed with a resonant frequency that seemed to vibrate through his very bones. It was a song of creation, a low, sonorous note that spoke of the enduring power of life, even in the face of the deepest darkness. He felt the subtle influence of the world serpent emanating from the direction of the gate, a discordant counter melody of destruction and oblivion. But here, in this sanctuary, that dissonant note was muted, softened by the overwhelming symphony of life. Vidar spent a considerable time within the chamber, absorbing the ambient energy, attuning himself to the pulse of the ancient roots. He traced the glowing runes on the massive root, seeking any clue, any hidden knowledge that might offer insight into the current crisis. The runes spoke of balance, of the interconnectedness of all things, of the cyclical nature of creation and destruction. They also hinted at the immense power required to maintain that balance and the dire consequences of its disruption. As he studied the runes, a subtle shift occurred in the ambient light. The phosphorescent moss seemed to brighten, its verdant glow pulsing with greater intensity. The crystals embedded in the rock began to emit faint, harmonic chimes, their collective resonance creating a new layer to the chamber's auditory landscape. It was as if the sanctuary itself was responding to his presence, to his intent. He noticed, etched into the surface of the root, near where it emerged from the earth, a series of glyphs that were different from the others. They were more intricate, more complex, and seemed to depict a narrative. As he focused his attention upon them, the surrounding light coalesced, forming faint, ephemeral images within the glow. He saw visions of creation, of the shaping of the nine realms, of the titanic struggle that had led to Jormungandr's imprisonment. He saw the ancient beings who had forged the seals, their forms shrouded in mist, their power immense and awe-inspiring. And then the images shifted, becoming more contemporary, more urgent. He saw the celestial premonitions, the fracturing of the ice, the groaning of the earth. He saw the weakening of the seals, the subtle tremors that betrayed the serpent's stirring. It was a chronicle of the world's slow decline, culminating in the present crisis. The glyphs on the root were a living record, a testament to the continuous vigilance required to maintain the cosmic order. He understood then that this sanctuary was not merely a passive reservoir of power, but an active participant in the world's defense. The roots of Yggdrasil, though unseen by most, were a vital component of the ancient bindings, their immense strength contributing to the containment of the world serpent. The failing seals at the gate were a direct consequence of a weakening connection to this deeper source of power. Vidar felt a renewed sense of purpose. While he could not confront the world serpent directly, he could, perhaps, reinforce this connection, strengthen the ancient bonds that emanated from this sacred place. He placed his hands upon the glowing runes of the massive root, channeling his own ancient lineage, his own inherent connection to the primal forces of creation. He closed his eyes, breathing deeply, allowing the scent of damp earth and ancient magic to fill his senses. He focused on the energy flowing through the roots, on the latent power of Yggdrasil. He envisioned it as a river of pure life, flowing from the heart of the world, nourishing the realms. He saw the encroaching darkness, the tendrils of chaos seeking to poison that river, to divert its course, and he willed, with every fiber of his being, for the river to flow, for the lifeblood of the world to continue its vital journey. The phosphorescent moss flared, its light washing over him like a benevolent tide. The harmonic chimes of the crystals intensified, creating a symphony that seemed to resonate with the very core of his soul. He felt a surge of energy course through him, a validation of his efforts. It was a subtle reinforcement, a rekindling of a dormant spark, but he knew it was significant. He continued to channel his energy, drawing upon the ancient pacts that bound him, seeking to infuse the sanctuary with his own strength, to bolster the fading power of the world tree. It was a taxing endeavor, drawing upon reserves of energy that he hadn't known he possessed. Yet, the conviction that this was a necessary act, a vital step in the unfolding events, sustained him. As he worked, the whispers from the forgotten gate seemed to recede slightly, their insidious allure momentarily dulled. The oppressive weight of the approaching doom felt marginally lighter, as if the sanctuary's renewed vigor had created a small pocket of resilience against the encroaching chaos. He was not a god nor an ancient titan. He was Vidar, a guardian, a sentinel, bound by duty and lineage to this world and its delicate balance. And in this hidden sanctuary, bathed in the ethereal glow of primordial life, he found a new understanding of his role. He was not merely a watcher from afar, but a living conduit, a bridge between the hidden power of the world tree and the fragile order of the realms. He opened his eyes, the visions fading, the echoes of ancient memories receding. The chamber was as it had been, yet subtly different. The light seemed more vibrant, the air more alive. He felt a profound sense of peace, a quiet certainty that, for now, he had done all that he could. The threat of Jormungandr remained. The seals at the forgotten gate were still weakening, but within this sacred space, life, in its most ancient and potent form, had found a renewed voice. He knew his time here was limited. The urgency of his mission, the need to understand the full extent of the unfolding crisis, called him back towards the fractured gateway. But he carried with him the quiet strength of this hidden sanctuary, the knowledge that even in the face of overwhelming darkness, the roots of Yggdrasil ran deep, and the pulse of life endured. He took one last look at the massive, glowing root, a silent promise passing between them. He would return, and he would continue to bear witness, to protect this vital nexus. For the fate of the nine realms, he now understood, depended on the strength of these hidden foundations. The path back to the gate, while still fraught with peril, felt subtly different, imbued with the quiet resilience he had found in the heart of the earth. The phosphorescent glow of the chamber seemed to deepen, not with an increase in brightness, but with a subtle shift in its quality, as if the very air had become saturated with ancient light. Vidar knelt before the colossal root, its surface a swirling tapestry of luminous runes that pulsed in time with the slow, resonant beat he felt emanating from its core. He had touched the conduit of Yggdrasil, and in doing so had opened himself to a dialogue far older than spoken languages, a communion of essences. He heard no voice, no ethereal pronouncements, yet a profound understanding began to unfurl within him, like the slow unfurling of a bloom in the heart of a glacier. It was a language of pure sensation, of resonating vibrations and coalescing energies. The roots of the world tree, in their slumber, were not inert. They were a vast network of awareness, a slow geological consciousness that perceived the subtle shifts in the cosmic tapestry. Vidar felt their awareness settle upon him, a gentle inquiry that acknowledged his presence, his lineage, and his purpose. It was like the ancient soil recognizing the millennia old seed from which it had sprung. There was no judgment, only a profound recognition. The impressions that flowed from the roots were not narrative in a human sense, but rather raw, fundamental truths. He felt the initial surge of creation, the explosive birth of the nine realms from the primordial void, a cosmic symphony of light and matter. He witnessed, not with eyes, but with an innate knowing, the slow growth of Yggdrasil, its roots delving into the very bedrock of existence, its branches reaching towards the celestial spheres, weaving the fabric of reality together. He understood that the tree was not merely a symbol, but the very scaffolding upon which the cosmos was built, its lifeblood coursing through every atom, every star, every living being. Then the impressions shifted, darkening. He felt the slow, inexorable creep of entropy, the subtle fraying of the cosmic threads. It wasn't a sudden invasion, but a gradual erosion, a weariness that settled upon the ancient structures. He perceived the immense, dormant power of Jormungandr not as a malevolent entity actively seeking release, but as a fundamental force of chaos, an inherent counterbalance to creation, forever coiled in the depths, its mere existence, a constant strain upon the cosmic order. The whispers he had heard at the gate were merely echoes of this latent power, the slow exhalation of a slumbering titan. The roots seemed to confirm his deepest, unspoken fears. Ragnarok was not a sudden, cataclysmic event, a single, apocalyptic battle. Instead, it was an unfolding, a slow unraveling, a natural consequence of the universe's inherent cycle. The weakening of the seals, the tremors, the failing light, these were not aberrations, but symptoms of a grander, inevitable progression. The cosmic balance, so carefully maintained by the ancient powers, was gradually tipping, not due to an external force, but from the sheer, immense weight of existence itself. He felt the roots communicate their ancient wisdom regarding this cycle. They showed him that the universe was not a static construct, but a dynamic, pulsating entity, forever caught in a dance of creation and dissolution. The age of gods and giants, the age of men and elves, were but fleeting moments in this eternal ebb and flow. And within this grand cosmic ebb and flow, his own vigil, his solitary stand at the precipice, was not an act of defiance against fate, but an integral part of the unfolding narrative. The impressions deepened, revealing that his lineage was not merely one of blood, but of resonance. He was a descendant of those who had first understood the deep connections, those who had woven the initial bindings, and who, in their wisdom, had foreseen the eventual weakening. His presence here, his ability to commune with the roots, was not an accident. It was the echo of an ancient pact, a forgotten duty that had lain dormant, awaiting the signs of the cosmic imbalance. He perceived that his purpose was not to single handedly avert Ragnarok, an impossible task that even the gods would struggle to achieve. Instead, his role was to bear witness, to understand the nature of the unfolding crisis, and, in his own way, to reinforce the fundamental connections that still held the fracturing reality together. The roots, in their slow, deliberate way, were communicating the necessity of maintaining this vital nexus, this hidden sanctuary, as a bulwark against the encroaching void. As he absorbed these profound truths, the sensations from the roots became more focused, more intimate. They seemed to be imparting specific impressions, fragments of knowledge that spoke of the true nature of the seals. They weren't merely magical barriers, but complex concatenations of cosmic energies anchored by the very life force of Yggdrasil. Their weakening was a direct consequence of a diminished flow of this vital energy, a subtle vampirism enacted by the slow hunger of primordial chaos. Vidar felt a surge of empathy for the world tree, a deep, almost paternal affection. He saw its immense, silent struggle, its tireless effort to maintain the order of the realms. He understood that the tree was not a passive entity, but an active participant, its very existence a constant act of binding, of anchoring. The burden it carried was immense, and it was a burden that had been gradually increasing over the millennia. He was not merely an observer, he was now a participant in the tree's enduring struggle. The ancient roots, recognizing his willingness to connect, to understand, and to contribute, seemed to extend their influence, not physically, but energetically. He felt a subtle strengthening within himself, a resurgence of ancient power that flowed from his own bloodline, amplified by the profound connection he had forged. The impressions also conveyed a sense of urgency, a subtle but undeniable warning that time was of the essence. The cyclical nature of the cosmos meant that while Ragnarok was inevitable, the timing of its full manifestation was not fixed. There were moments, critical junctures, where the balance could be nudged, where the scales could be tipped, however slightly, in favor of order. His presence here, his ability to channel energy and reinforce the connection, was one such moment. He felt the roots guide his consciousness, showing him the pathways of energy that flowed through their network. They weren't just conduits of power, they were intricate pathways of information, carrying the accumulated wisdom of ages. He saw how the very structure of the nine realms was intertwined with the roots of Yggdrasil, how the stability of one was intrinsically linked to the strength of the other. The whispers from the forgotten gate, though distant, seemed to momentarily recede further, their insidious allure weakened by the vibrant, life-affirming energy emanating from this sacred space. It was a fleeting respite, a temporary reinforcement, but it was a tangible effect. It proved that even in the face of overwhelming cosmic forces, small, determined acts of preservation could have a meaningful impact. He spent what felt like an eternity, yet was likely only a matter of hours, communing with the ancient roots. He absorbed their silent wisdom, their profound understanding of the cosmic dance. He felt the deep, primal truth that his own existence and the existence of all the nine realms was inextricably linked to the enduring strength of Yggdrasil. His solitary vigil was not a burden, but a sacred trust, a continuation of an ancient lineage of guardians who had understood the importance of these hidden foundations. The impressions from the roots began to fade, not abruptly, but like a slow, gentle withdrawal, as if they had imparted all that they could in that moment. Vidar felt a profound sense of gratitude, a deep connection to the ancient forces that underpinned his world. He knew that his journey was far from over. The forgotten gate still pulsed with the encroaching darkness, and the fate of the realms hung precariously in the balance. But he carried with him a newfound understanding, a quiet strength forged in the heart of Yggdrasil, and the certainty that even in the deepest darkness, the roots of life ran eternally deep. He rose from his kneeling position, the ethereal light of the chamber seeming to linger on his form, a testament to the communion he had shared. The path back to the perilous entrance of the chasm awaited, but he walked it with a different resolve, a quiet confidence born from understanding the true, enduring power that lay at the very foundation of existence. The phosphorescent glow of the chamber seemed to deepen, not with an increase in brightness, but with a subtle shift in its quality, as if the very air had become saturated with ancient light. Vidar knelt before the colossal root, its surface a swirling tapestry of luminous runes that pulsed in time with the slow, resonant beat he felt emanating from its core. He had touched the conduit of Yggdrasil, and in doing so, had opened himself to a dialogue far older than spoken languages, a communion of essences. He heard no voice, no ethereal pronouncements, yet a profound understanding began to unfurl within him, like the slow unfurling of a bloom in the heart of a glacier. It was a language of pure sensation, of resonating vibrations and coalescing energies. The roots of the world tree, in their slumber, were not inert. They were a vast network of awareness, a slow geological consciousness that perceived the subtle shifts in the cosmic tapestry. Vidar felt their awareness settle upon him, a gentle inquiry that acknowledged his presence, his lineage, and his purpose. It was like the ancient soil recognizing the millennia old seed from which it had sprung. There was no judgment, only a profound recognition. The impressions that flowed from the roots were not narrative in a human sense, but rather raw, fundamental truths. He felt the initial surge of creation, the explosive birth of the nine realms from the primordial void, a cosmic symphony of light and matter. He witnessed, not with eyes, but with an innate knowing, the slow growth of Yggdrasil, its roots delving into the very bedrock of existence, its branches reaching towards the celestial spheres, weaving the fabric of reality together. He understood that the tree was not merely a symbol, but the very scaffolding upon which the cosmos was built, its lifeblood coursing through every atom, every star, every living being. Then the impressions shifted, darkening. He felt the slow, inexorable creep of entropy, the subtle fraying of the cosmic threads. It wasn't a sudden invasion, but a gradual erosion, a weariness that settled upon the ancient structures. He perceived the immense, dormant power of Jormungandr, not as a malevolent entity actively seeking release, but as a fundamental force of chaos, an inherent counterbalance to creation, forever coiled in the depths, its mere existence a constant strain upon the cosmic order. The whispers he had heard at the gate were merely echoes of this latent power, the slow exhalation of a slumbering titan. The roots seemed to confirm his deepest, unspoken fears. Ragnarok was not a sudden, cataclysmic event, a single, apocalyptic battle. Instead, it was an unfolding, a slow unraveling, a natural consequence of the universe's inherent cycle, the weakening of the seals, the tremors, the failing light. These were not aberrations, but symptoms of a grander, inevitable progression. The cosmic balance, so carefully maintained by the ancient powers, was gradually tipping, not due to an external force, but from the sheer, immense weight of existence itself. He felt the roots communicate their ancient wisdom regarding this cycle. They showed him that the universe was not a static construct, but a dynamic, pulsating entity, forever caught in a dance of creation and dissolution. The age of gods and giants, the age of men and elves, were but fleeting moments in this eternal ebb and flow. And within this grand, cosmic ebb and flow, his own vigil, his solitary stand at the precipice, was not an act of defiance against fate, but an integral part of the unfolding narrative. The impressions deepened, revealing that his lineage was not merely one of blood, but of resonance. He was a descendant of those who had first understood the deep connections, those who had woven the initial bindings, and who, in their wisdom, had foreseen the eventual weakening. His presence here, his ability to commune with the roots, was not an accident. It was the echo of an ancient pact, a forgotten duty that had lain dormant, awaiting the signs of the cosmic imbalance. He perceived that his purpose was not to single-handedly avert Ragnarok, an impossible task that even the gods would struggle to achieve. Instead, his role was to bear witness, to understand the nature of the unfolding crisis, and in his own way, to reinforce the fundamental connections that still held the fracturing reality together. The roots, in their slow, deliberate way, were communicating the necessity of maintaining this vital nexus, this hidden sanctuary, as a bulwark against the encroaching void. As he absorbed these profound truths, the sensations from the roots became more focused, more intimate. They seemed to be imparting specific impressions, fragments of knowledge that spoke of the true nature of the seals. They weren't merely magical barriers, but complex concatenations of cosmic energies anchored by the very life force of Yggdrasil. Their weakening was a direct consequence of a diminished flow of this vital energy, a subtle vampirism enacted by the slow hunger of primordial chaos. Vidar felt a surge of empathy for the world tree, a deep, almost paternal affection. He saw its immense, silent struggle, its tireless effort to maintain the order of the realms. He understood that the tree was not a passive entity, but an active participant, its very existence a constant act of binding, of anchoring. The burden it carried was immense, and it was a burden that had been gradually increasing over the millennia. He was not merely an observer, he was now a participant in the tree's enduring struggle. The ancient roots, recognizing his willingness to connect, to understand, and to contribute, seemed to extend their influence, not physically, but energetically. He felt a subtle strengthening within himself, a resurgence of ancient power that flowed from his own bloodline, amplified by the profound connection he had forged. The impressions also conveyed a sense of urgency, a subtle but undeniable warning that time was of the essence. The cyclical nature of the cosmos meant that while Ragnarok was inevitable, the timing of its full manifestation was not fixed. There were moments, critical junctures, where the balance could be nudged, where the scales could be tipped, however slightly, in favor of order. His presence here, his ability to channel energy and reinforce the connection, was one such moment. He felt the roots guide his consciousness, showing him the pathways of energy that flowed through their network. They weren't just conduits of power, they were intricate pathways of information carrying the accumulated wisdom of ages. He saw how the very structure of the nine realms was intertwined with the roots of Yggdrasil, how the stability of one was intrinsically linked to the strength of the other. The whispers from the forgotten gate, though distant, seemed to momentarily recede further, their insidious allure weakened by the vibrant, life-affirming energy emanating from this sacred space. It was a fleeting respite, a temporary reinforcement, but it was a tangible effect. It proved that even in the face of overwhelming cosmic forces, small, determined acts of preservation could have a meaningful impact. He spent what felt like an eternity, yet was likely only a matter of hours, communing with the ancient roots. He absorbed their silent wisdom, their profound understanding of the cosmic dance. He felt the deep, primal truth that his own existence and the existence of all the nine realms was inextricably linked to the enduring strength of Yggdrasil. His solitary vigil was not a burden, but a sacred trust, a continuation of an ancient lineage of guardians who had understood the importance of these hidden foundations. The impressions from the roots began to fade, not abruptly, but like a slow, gentle withdrawal, as if they had imparted all that they could in that moment. Vidar felt a profound sense of gratitude, a deep connection to the ancient forces that underpinned his world. He knew that his journey was far from over. The forgotten gate still pulsed with the encroaching darkness, and the fate of the realms hung precariously in the balance. But he carried with him a newfound understanding, a quiet strength forged in the heart of Yggdrasil, and the certainty that even in the deepest darkness, the roots of life ran eternally deep. He rose from his kneeling position, the ethereal light of the chamber seeming to linger on his form, a testament to the communion he had shared. The path back to the perilous entrance of the chasm awaited, but he walked it with a different resolve, a quiet confidence born from understanding the true, enduring power that lay at the very foundation of existence. As Vidar straightened, his gaze swept over the chamber, no longer just a cave carved into the earth, but a sanctuary imbued with an ancient presence. He felt it now, a subtle hum beneath the more immediate resonance of Yggdrasil's roots. It was a softer magic, more diffused, like the scent of wildflowers on a summer breeze, or the gentle lapping of waves against a shore. This was the echo of the Vanir. The Aesir were the thunder and lightning, the sharp, defining force that shaped the realms through will and battle. But the Vanir, the elder deities of magic, fertility, and natural forces, were the very essence of existence, woven into the fabric of life itself. He sensed their lingering touch in the very stones of this place, in the way the luminous moss clung to the walls, casting its soft, verdant light. It wasn't the stark, purposeful glow of the world tree's conduits, but a more organic luminescence, as if the rock itself breathed light. He ran a hand along a smooth, weathered surface, feeling not just the cool solidity of stone, but a faint warmth, a residual pulse of life that spoke of millennia of communion. These were not the raw, primal energies of creation that the roots had shown him, but the refined, nurtured magic of those who understood the deep, intricate workings of the world. He imagined them here, not in mighty halls of gold and bronze, but amidst the living roots of Yggdrasil, perhaps tending to its growth, weaving spells of protection and abundance into its very being. They were the gardeners of the cosmos, their power flowing from an understanding of cycles, of nurture, of the interconnectedness of all things. The runes he had seen on a root were ancient, potent, but here there were other symbols, more fluid, more organic, etched into the natural formations of the chamber, seeming to shift and reform subtly as he watched. They spoke of a different kind of power, one that coaxed and encouraged rather than commanded. A profound sense of peace settled over him, a feeling of belonging that transcended his earthly lineage. He was a descendant of Heimdall, a guardian of the Aesir, yet in this place he felt an older kinship, a connection to something more fundamental. It was as if the lingering consciousness of the Vanir recognized the intent of his watch, the solitary dedication to preserving the fragile balance. Their presence was not a guiding hand, but a silent affirmation, a gentle acknowledgement that his vigil was not a lonely one, but a continuation of an ancient duty that predated the very conflicts that now threatened to tear the realms asunder. He felt their wisdom seep into him, not in the form of direct instruction, but as an amplification of his own senses, a sharpening of his intuition. He understood, with a clarity that surprised him, that the strength of Yggdrasil was not merely physical or arcane, but also spiritual. The well-being of the world tree was tied to the health of the natural world, to the cycles of growth and decay, to the very magic that permeated existence. The Vanir, in their deep connection to these forces, had understood this implicitly. They had nurtured not just the tree, but the very essence of life that flowed through it. He realized that his role as guardian, as decreed by the Aesir, was perhaps more nuanced than he had initially understood. It wasn't just about standing at the gate, about being a bulwark against the encroaching darkness. It was also about understanding and reinforcing the deeper currents of life, the very vitality that the world tree depended upon. The Vanir, long withdrawn from the direct affairs of the gods, had left their imprint here, a testament to their enduring influence. Their magic was not about conquering or dominating, but about sustaining and flourishing. As he moved deeper into the chamber, exploring its natural contours, he discovered alcoves carved by time and water, where phosphorescent fungi bloomed in intricate patterns, casting an ethereal, almost hypnotic glow. He saw remnants of what might have been offerings, smooth, polished stones, delicate shells, seeds of ancient plants preserved in amber-like sap. These were not the offerings of war or supplication made to the Aesir, but of gratitude and reverence for the life-giving forces of the world. They spoke of a time when the divine was not separate from the natural, but an intrinsic part of it. He felt a surge of understanding regarding the subtle magic that permeated this place. It was a magic of growth, of healing, of deep, abiding connection. It was the magic that allowed life to persist even in the harshest of conditions, the magic that ensured the return of spring after the longest winter. The Vanir had mastered this intricate art, weaving it into the very fabric of existence, and their presence here was a powerful echo of that mastery. Vidar realized that his own lineage, stretching back to Heimdall, the ever-watchful sentinel, was not merely about vigilance. It was also about the deep, intuitive understanding of the world he guarded. Heimdall, after all, was known for his keen senses, his ability to hear the grass grow and the wool on the sheep's back, while the Aesir represented a more direct, often forceful, approach to maintaining order. Their power was ultimately underpinned by the very life force that the Vanir so deeply understood and cultivated. He found himself tracing the patterns of the fungi with a fingertip, feeling a subtle warmth emanating from them. It was as if the light itself held a memory, a whispered secret of the Vanir's presence. He felt a sense of reverence for these ancient deities, a deep respect for their understanding of the world's delicate balance. They were the quiet custodians of life, their magic a constant, gentle hum beneath the more overt pronouncements of the Aesir. The chamber seemed to hum with a revitalized energy, not the raw, untamed power of Yggdrasil's core, but a more gentle, nurturing force. It was as if his presence, his communion with the world tree, had awakened these dormant echoes, stirring the residual magic of the Vanir. He felt a subtle shift within himself, a deepening of his own connection to the natural world, an intuitive understanding of the subtle energies that flowed through the earth, the water, and the air. This was more than just a hidden sanctuary. It was a living testament to a forgotten aspect of the divine, a reminder that the universe was not merely a stage for the battles of gods and giants, but a vibrant, interconnected ecosystem sustained by a magic older and perhaps more profound than any wielded by the Aesir. The Vanir's legacy was one of life, of growth, of the enduring power of nature. And in this quiet, luminous chamber, Vidar felt that legacy resonate within him, a gentle, persistent echo that reinforced his sacred charge. He was not merely a guardian against the end. He was also a protector of the life that endured, the life that the Vanir had so lovingly nurtured. The quiet advance of destiny, he understood, was not just about preventing ruin, but about preserving the very essence of existence, a truth that resonated deeply within him, thanks to the spectral presence of the Vanir. The resonance of Yggdrasil's roots still thrummed within Vidar's very bones, a silent symphony that had rearranged the understanding of his existence. Yet, as he turned from the luminous heart of the world tree, a different kind of awareness began to unfurl, subtler, yet no less profound. The chamber, still awash in the gentle, otherworldly light, now seemed to whisper of a different kind of power, one that did not roar like Thor's hammer or flash like Odin's spear, but flowed like sap through ancient wood or bloomed like moss on a forgotten stone. It was the legacy of the Vanir, the elder deities whose influence, though often overshadowed by the more martial Aesir, was woven into the very fabric of life, fertility, and the deep magic of the earth. He felt their presence not as a direct communication, but as a pervasive atmosphere, a nurturing aura that seemed to imbue the very air with a sense of quiet resilience. The luminous fungi clinging to the cavern walls, casting their soft, verdant glow, pulsed with a life that felt both ancient and vibrant, a testament to their long stewardship. It was a magic of growth, of persistence, a stark contrast to the overt displays of power that defined the Aesir. Vidar, a son of Heimdall, accustomed to the vigilance and the stark pronouncements of war and fate, found himself contemplating a different facet of divine influence, one that operated not on the battlefield, but in the quiet spaces between moments, nurturing the seeds of existence. The Vanir, he mused, were the architects of the world's enduring vitality, the keepers of its deep, resonant magic. They were the ones who understood the intricate dance of life and decay, the subtle energies that sustained the cosmos. Their influence here, in this sacred chamber, so intimately connected to Yggdrasil, was not a recent intrusion, but a deep-seated integration. He imagined them tending to the great tree, their touch not forceful, but coaxing, weaving spells of protection and abundance into its very being, ensuring its continued strength against the encroaching shadows. Their presence was a silent affirmation of his own vigil, a recognition of the shared, albeit different, commitment to the preservation of the realms. This was not a solitary stand against the inevitable, but a continuation of an ancient, intertwined duty. The communion with the roots had revealed the grand, cosmic scale of Ragnarok, an unraveling, a natural cycle of creation and dissolution. But the lingering presence of the Vanir here spoke of a different truth, one that focused on the individual threads of life, the persistent, quiet forces that ensured existence itself endured. It was the strength found not in the thunderous roar of defiance, but in the silent, unwavering commitment to nurture and protect. Vidar's journey into this subterranean sanctuary, his communion with the raw power of Yggdrasil, was not merely an act of preparation, it was the genesis of his unique understanding of the twilight of the gods. He was not destined to be a herald of thunderous pronouncements or a wielder of world-shattering might. His path was to be one of quiet observation, of patient endurance, of fulfilling his duty in the shadows, a role far removed from the epic clashes sung by skalds, while the sagas would forever echo with the thunder of Thor's battles, the clash of Odin's spear against Fenrir's jaws, and the final, defiant stand of the Aesir. Vidar's own contribution would be of a different nature. He was the unsung hero, his strength derived not from the awe of multitudes, but from the quiet fulfillment of a sacred trust. His descent into the heart of the world, his communion with the ancient powers, was the true beginning of the twilight, not in the sense of immediate catastrophe, but in the quiet shift of understanding, the preparation for a long vigil that would test the very foundations of his spirit. He felt the weight of this realization settle upon him, not as a burden, but as a profound clarity. The epic battles were but the flamboyant, inevitable conclusion to a process that had begun in the quiet, hidden places, in the silent exchanges between a mortal and the ancient earth. His role was not to lead armies or to challenge the primeval forces directly, but to be a steadfast anchor, a quiet sentinel in the face of overwhelming cosmic change. The wisdom gleaned from the roots of Yggdrasil, amplified by the subtle magic of the veneer, had illuminated the true nature of his purpose: to witness, to understand, and to endure. The memory of the whispers from the forgotten gate still lingered at the periphery of his awareness, a faint tremor of the encroaching chaos. But here, surrounded by the gentle luminescence and the lingering echoes of the veneer, those whispers felt distant, their immediate threat diminished by the profound sense of peace and interconnectedness that permeated the chamber. He understood that the battle against the encroaching void was not to be won by a single, decisive act, but through 1,000 quiet victories, a constant tending to the fragile flame of existence. As he prepared to ascend, to re enter the world of men and gods teetering on the brink, Vidar carried with him more than just knowledge. He carried a quiet resolve, a deep seated understanding that the most profound acts of courage were often those performed in solitude, unseen and unheralded. The epic scale of Ragnarok, with its gods and monsters locked in a titanic struggle, was but one facet of destiny's intricate tapestry. The other, the subtle, enduring thread, was woven by those who, like him, stood firm in the quiet places, their commitment unyielding, their purpose unwavering, even when the world outside was consumed by the thunderous march of doom. His journey had been a descent into the very heart of existence, and it had revealed to him that the true beginning of the end was not a cataclysm, but a quiet, resolute embrace of duty, a silent promise to stand sentinel, even when no one was watching. The path of the unsung was not a lesser path, but one of profound, enduring strength, a strength forged in the crucible of silent communion and unwavering commitment to the enduring life that the veneer so deeply cherished. He emerged from the chamber, the luminous glow of the fungi clinging to his form like a second skin, a subtle testament to the enduring magic he had experienced, a magic far removed from the clamor of war, yet vital to the survival of all. The true twilight of the gods, he now understood, began not with the roar of the wolf Fenrir, but with the silent dedication of a single, steadfast soul in the heart of the world. The years had etched themselves not onto his skin, but into the very marrow of his bones. Vidar, son of Heimdall, had long since ceased to count the turning of seasons in the world above. Here, in the hushed chambers connected to the ancient roots of Yggdrasil, time was a more fluid, more resonant concept, measured not by the sun's arc, but by the slow, inexorable pulse of the world's heart. His vigil, a duty inherited and embraced, had become the bedrock of his existence, a singular focus in the vast, echoing expanse of his life. The silence, once an imposition, a stark contrast to the clamor of the realms he was sworn to protect, had become a companion, albeit a demanding one. It was a silence pregnant with anticipation, a constant hum of awareness that ached with the knowledge of what was to come. This was not the battlefield where valor was sung in booming verses and demonstrated through the clash of steel. Vidar's war was fought in the quiet spaces, in the unwavering commitment of his presence. He was the sentinel whose gaze never faltered, whose watch was never broken. The weight of this responsibility was a constant, palpable presence, a pressure that settled upon his shoulders like a mantle woven from the very fabric of fate. He understood, with a clarity born of prolonged solitude, that his unwavering vigilance was not merely a personal penance, but a vital bulwark against the tide of oblivion, while others, Perhaps even some of the gods dwelling in their lofty halls might have succumbed to complacency, to the comforting illusion of perpetual peace. Vidar remained anchored to the truth, the grim, unvarnished truth of what loomed. The isolation, too, had its own peculiar gravity. He had spoken with few since his solemn oath, his interactions reduced to necessary exchanges, brief nods, and the occasional terse report. The vibrant tapestry of Midgard, with its bustling markets, its boisterous feasts, and its intricate web of human relationships, was a distant memory. Here, his only company was the whispering breath of Yggdrasil, the subtle phosphorescence of the subterranean fungi, and the echoes of his own thoughts. This profound solitude could have been a crushing weight, a descent into despair. Yet, for Vidar, it had become a forge, tempering his spirit into something unyielding. He had learned to find solace not in companionship, but in the unwavering certainty of his purpose. He remembered, with a pang that was less of longing and more of a distant echo of shared experience, the days when his father, Heimdall, the ever watchful, had been his primary tutor. Heimdall's voice, a clarion call across the Bifrost, had been the soundtrack to his youth. But Heimdall's watch was external, a guard upon the shimmering bridge between worlds. Vidar's watch was internal, a deep-seated awareness of the Earth's slow decay, the subtle fraying of the cosmic tapestry. His father had guarded the thresholds, Vidar guarded the foundations, and in this deeper, more profound guardianship, he had found a strength that surprised even himself. It was a stoic grace, a quiet dignity that settled upon him like a second skin, a testament to years of internal fortitude. The psychological toll was undeniable, a subtle erosion that chipped away at the edges of his former self. There were moments, particularly in the deepest hours of the subterranean night, when the sheer enormity of his task threatened to overwhelm him. The silence could become a roaring void, the darkness a palpable entity pressing in from all sides. In those times, he would focus on the slow, steady beat of his own heart, a rhythm that mirrored the pulse of the world tree itself. He would recall the ancient lore, the sagas of endurance, the tales of those who had faced insurmountable odds with quiet determination. These were not the glorious battles of kings and heroes, but the silent struggles of the common folk, the farmers who tilled the soil through harsh winters, the mothers who nurtured their children against all odds. Their resilience, passed down through generations, resonated within him, a quiet affirmation that even in the face of overwhelming darkness, life persisted. His inner strength was not the boisterous, outward facing might of Thor, nor the sharp, decisive power of Odin. It was a deep, abiding reservoir, drawn from a wellspring of unwavering conviction. He had witnessed the gradual decline, the subtle shifts in the cosmic balance that others had failed to perceive or had chosen to ignore. He had seen the stars flicker with an unnatural intensity, heard the wind carry whispers of ancient discontent, and felt the very earth tremble with a preternatural unease. While the realms above reveled in their perceived stability, Vidar had been immersed in the growing evidence of their precariousness. This foreknowledge, this constant awareness of the precipice, had forged him into a being of immense resilience, a figure shaped by the quiet, relentless pressure of destiny. He had learned to trust the subtle currents of existence, the deep, often unseen forces that governed the cycles of birth and death, creation and destruction. The Vanir, whose magic was intrinsically tied to the earth's enduring vitality, had left their subtle imprint upon this place, a lingering aura of gentle persistence that Vidar now understood as a crucial element of his own vigil. It was not enough to be a warrior. One had to be a guardian of life itself, a silent protector of the fragile flame of existence. This understanding had come not through grand pronouncements, but through the quiet communion with the roots, through the slow absorption of the earth's ancient wisdom. His resolve was not built on anger or on a thirst for vengeance. It was built on a profound sense of duty, a sacred trust placed in his hands by his lineage and by the very fabric of the cosmos. He was the embodiment of watchfulness, the living testament to the fact that vigilance was not a passive act, but an active, consuming commitment. Even in the deepest solitude, he felt the interconnectedness of all things, a vast, intricate web, where his own role, however humble it might seem in the grand theater of the gods, was nonetheless essential. He was the anchor in the storm, the silent observer who ensured that the threads of fate, however frayed, did not snap entirely. The world above might have been blind to the encroaching shadows, lost in the revelry of its own perceived permanence. But Vidar was awake. He was aware, and he would remain so, his spirit a beacon of unwavering resolve in the heart of the world. The silence was his shield, his solitude, his strength, and the weight of his vigil, though immense, was a burden he carried with a quiet, unshakable dignity. He was the son of Heimdall, and he would uphold the legacy of watchfulness even unto the very end of days, his spirit as unyielding as the ancient stone that cradled him, his purpose as clear and as sharp as the first frost on a winter morning. He was the living embodiment of the quiet advance of destiny, a silent force in a world teetering on the brink. His inner strength, a testament to the enduring power of commitment. He understood that the true measure of his worth lay not in the accolades of men or gods, but in the unwavering fulfillment of his solemn duty, a duty that demanded not the roar of battle, but the silent, steadfast endurance of one who stands sentinel when all others have turned away. The ancient stone, cool and unyielding beneath his worn boots, seemed to sigh as Vidar stepped from the sacred confines of the hidden temple. The air, once heavy with the stillness of ages, now thrummed with a subtle, disquieting energy. It was a vibration that resonated deep within his bones, a silent herald of the profound shifts occurring across the 9 realms, the protective ward that had shielded the temple's entrance for millennia, a testament to the meticulous craftsmanship of the ancient Aesir, had been meticulously unraveled by his hand. Now, the world outside awaited, a world on the precipice. He looked up, his gaze drawn to the heavens, though the perpetual twilight that clung to this realm obscured any familiar celestial bodies. Yet, even here, in the subterranean heart of existence, the changes were undeniable. The faint phosphorescence that usually illuminated the cavernous expanse was now punctuated by unsettling flashes of emerald and violet, errant sparks of a cosmic fire that seemed to burn just beyond the veil of mortal perception. These were not the steady gleams of guiding stars, but the erratic pulse of a dying heartbeat, a testament to the disarray that was beginning to seep into the very fabric of creation. The whispers of Yggdrasil, which had always spoken in a language of slow growth and patient endurance, now carried a new cadence, a frantic, agitated murmur, like leaves rustling in a storm that had yet to break. A low rumble, almost imperceptible at first, began to build. It was a sound that emanated not from a single direction, but from all directions, a pervasive tremor that seemed to rise from the very bedrock of the world. This was no geological anomaly. Vidar recognized the signature of forces far grander and far more terrible. He had felt such tremors before, faint stirrings deep within the earth's core. But this was different. This was a sustained, growing vibration, as if the planet itself was flexing under an immense, unseen pressure. It was the sound of slumbering titans stirring, of ancient packs beginning to fray, of a world awakening to a terrible dawn. His senses, honed by years of solitary vigilance, strained to decipher the nature of this growing disturbance. He could feel the pull of the distant oceans, their restless tides churning with an unnatural ferocity. The salt-laced spray, carried on currents that defied natural patterns, seemed to taste of something ancient and malevolent. The very air grew heavy, charged with an unspoken anticipation. The subtle shifts in the winds that he had long monitored now carried the acrid scent of ozone, the metallic tang of blood, and something else, something wild and untamed, a primal musk that spoke of gnashing teeth and unfettered hunger. The great wolf, the name, a shadow in the deepest recesses of his mind, began to coalesce with a palpable reality. Fenrir. He had been a silent presence in Vidar's awareness for centuries, a coiled menace whose eventual emergence was as certain as the turning of the ages. But now, the rumbling was not just a tremor, it was the echo of his awakening. The earth's groans were the sounds of his chains straining, of his immense power being unleashed from its ancient bonds. The sea's fury was the reflection of his rage, a mirror to the primal chaos he embodied. Vidar remained still, a statue carved from the very stone he stood upon. His training, his very being, was geared towards observation, towards understanding the subtle prelude to cataclysm. This was not a moment for rash action, but for acute perception. The cosmic phenomena were no longer mere indicators. They were active participants in the unfolding drama. The erratic lights in the sky, the agitated whispers of Yggdrasil, the earth-shattering tremors, they were all threads in a tapestry that was being violently rewoven. He felt a subtle shift in the gravitational pull, a distortion that suggested the movement of immense, unanchored bodies. The lore spoke of other beings, stirred from their aeons of slumber or their appointed places, drawn by the irresistible siren song of Ragnarok, the icy breath of Jotunheim, usually a distant chill, now seemed to snake its way through the very air, a precursor to the frost giant's inevitable advance. The fiery inferno of Muspelheim sent tendrils of heat that promised an approaching conflagration, a world consumed by the wrath of Surt. The quiet advance of destiny was no longer quiet. It was a thunderous, inexorable march. The world was not simply dimming, it was actively transforming, shedding its old skin in a violent convulsion. Vidar understood that his vigil had reached its crescendo. The years of silent watchfulness, the internal preparation, had led to this singular moment. He was no longer merely a guardian in the shadows. He was a witness, a participant, a linchpin in the grand, terrifying design. He drew a deep breath, the charged air filling his lungs. There was no fear, only a profound sense of inevitability. He was the son of Heimdall, the ever watchful, and his father's legacy was etched into his very soul. But his was a watch of a different kind, a deep, internal vigilance that had prepared him for the unraveling of the cosmos itself. He could feel the ancient magic of this place, the residual power of creation, now being tested, strained to its breaking point. The tremors intensified, rippling through the ground with a violence that threatened to shatter the very foundations of the world. The phosphorescent fungi pulsed in a frantic rhythm, their light flickering like dying embers. The whispers of Yggdrasil rose to a cacophony, a desperate, mournful lament interwoven with the enraged roars of awakening beasts. He could almost hear the clanking of chains, the snapping of ancient fetters, the guttural snarls of immense power being unleashed. The sea, that vast, unknowable entity, began to churn with a ferocity that defied description. Waves, taller than any mountain, rose and fell with a deafening roar, their crests laced with an unnatural, phosphorescent foam. It was as if the ocean itself was recoiling from an unseen horror, or perhaps actively contributing to the chaos. The scent of brine was now mingled with the unmistakable odor of decay, of things long buried and best left undisturbed. Vidar's eyes, sharp and unwavering, scanned the horizon, though the horizon itself seemed to warp and shift with the growing instability. He knew, with an absolute certainty that transcended mere knowledge, that other forces were at play. The sons of Loki, the embodiment of chaos and destruction, were stirring. The serpent of Midgard, Jormungandr, would soon cast its colossal coils upon the shores, its venomous breath a harbinger of plague and pestilence. The monstrous wolf, Fenrir, his ancestor and his ultimate adversary, was the primal source of this seismic upheaval. His awakening, the signal for the world's descent into primordial savagery. He could feel the currents of destiny pulling him, not towards a specific battlefield, but towards a nexus of unfolding events. His purpose was not to charge headlong into the fray, but to be where he was needed most, to bear witness and to understand the mechanisms of the coming apocalypse. The quiet advance was over. The storm had arrived, and Vidar, the silent sentinel, was now to stand firm against the tempest that would reshape the very foundations of existence. The world was no longer merely foreshadowing its end. It was actively embracing it, and he was positioned at the very threshold of that transformation. The subtle shifts had culminated in a roaring cataclysm, and he was ready. The perpetual twilight that had once been a comforting cloak of solitude now felt like a shroud, heavy with the oppressive weight of impending change. Vidar stood on the precipice of the world, the jagged cliffs beneath his feet, echoing the fractures that rent the very fabric of the nine realms. The air, thick with the acrid tang of ozone and the metallic whisper of spilled ichor, vibrated with a raw, untamed power. This was no longer a passive observation. He was now immersed in the heart of the unfolding cataclysm. The silent vigil, the centuries of watchful stillness, had culminated not in a quiet fading, but in a violent, earth-shattering eruption. The whispers of Yggdrasil, once a low hum of cosmic wisdom, had become a maddening shriek, a symphony of destruction that spoke of ancient chains breaking and primordial forces unleashed. He could feel the tremor of Fenrir's awakening resonating not just through the stone, but through his very soul. It was a primal scream, a hunger that transcended mortal comprehension, and it was the clarion call of Ragnarok, The sea, a churning cauldron of phosphorescent fury, mirrored the inferno igniting in the heavens. Tendrils of heat, bearing the unmistakable scent of Muspelheim, snaked through the salty spray, promising a world consumed by Surt's righteous fire. And from the north, a biting cold, imbued with the malevolent intent of Jotunheim, crept closer, a chilling harbinger of the frost giant's inevitable march. The subtle shifts he had so meticulously catalogued were no longer subtle. They were a tidal wave of cosmic chaos, crashing upon the shores of existence. Vidar's gaze swept across the tortured landscape. The familiar, if somber, beauty of his isolated vigil had been replaced by a scene of apocalyptic grandeur. The sky, an unnatural canvas of bruised purples and virulent greens, flickered with errant sparks, the dying breaths of celestial bodies, or perhaps the nascent glow of a new, terrifying order. He had unraveled the ancient ward, not as an act of trespass, but as a necessary step, a surrender to the irresistible current of destiny. The sacred confines of the hidden temple had served their purpose, a sanctuary of preparation, but the world outside now demanded his presence, his understanding, his unyielding resolve. He was the son of Heimdall, the ever watchful, and the legacy of his father, the guardian of Bifrost, flowed through his veins. But his watch had been different, an internal vigilance, a deep communion with the slow, inexorable turning of the cosmic wheel. He had felt the subtle stirrings of a fate for centuries, charting the course of this inevitable collision. Now, the path was laid bare, not as a clear road, but as a battlefield, scarred and ravaged, yet pregnant with the promise of what lay beyond. The quiet advance had indeed ended, but the true struggle, the crucible of a new beginning, was only now igniting. The tremors intensified, a symphony of destruction that threatened to tear the very foundations of the world asunder. The earth groaned, not in pain, but in the agony of transformation. Yggdrasil, the world tree, shivered, its ancient branches groaning under the strain of a cosmos being violently reshaped. Vidar could feel the roots of the great tree quivering, a deep ache that spread through the land, a testament to the cosmic forces that were tearing at its very core. The whispers of the tree, once a soothing balm, were now a cacophony of screams, a lament for the dying age. Yet, amidst the chaos, a new cadence began to emerge, a faint, resilient hum beneath the din of destruction. It was the sound of life, tenacious and unyielding, clinging to existence, even as the old world crumbled. He turned his gaze towards the sea. The colossal waves, illuminated by the unearthly glow of cosmic energies, crashed against the cliffs with a fury that seemed to possess a sentient malice. The salt spray carried the scent of decay, of the ancient seabed, churned and disturbed, of things long buried now brought to the surface. This was not merely the fury of the ocean, it was the restless turning of Jormungandr, the Midgard serpent, its immense coils stirring in the deep, its venomous breath poisoning the very air. Vidar could sense the primal power of the serpent, its immense strength coiled and ready to lash out, a harbinger of pestilence and ruin. The air crackled with an unseen energy, a palpable force that seemed to bend the very light around him. The flashes of emerald and violet were no longer sporadic. They coalesced into a swirling vortex of power, a manifestation of forces that defied mortal understanding. This was the nexus, the point where the old world bled into the new, where the echoes of Ragnarok resonated with the promise of a future yet unwritten. He could feel the ancient magic of this place, the residual power of creation itself, being tested, stretched to its breaking point, and in that strain, giving way to something new, something potent. Vidar remained resolute, a solitary figure against the backdrop of cosmic upheaval. His training, his very existence, was a testament to the power of stillness, of observation, of understanding the intricate dance of fate. He was not a warrior who sought glory in battle, but a sentinel who understood the deeper currents of existence. His purpose was to bear witness, to comprehend the mechanics of the unfolding apocalypse, and in that understanding, to find his place in the new order. The silence of his vigil had been broken, but the true battle was not one of swords and shields, but of spirit and resolve. He took another deep breath, the charged air filling his lungs with a strange vitality. There was no fear, only an unwavering sense of purpose. He had faced the shadows of his own lineage, the ancestral burden of vigilance, and now he stood at the precipice of a new beginning, armed with the wisdom of the past and the strength to forge the future. The earth continued to tremble, the heavens continued to bleed light, and the whispers of Yggdrasil, though strained, still held the promise of continuity. The end of an age was not merely an ending, it was a painful, glorious metamorphosis. As the ground beneath him pulsed with the rhythm of a dying world and a nascent one, Vidar's gaze remained fixed on the horizon. The horizon itself seemed to waver, a fluid boundary between what was and what would be. He could feel the pull of destiny, not towards a specific battlefield, but towards a convergence of forces, a point where the fate of all realms would be decided. His role was not to engage in the immediate fray, but to be the fulcrum, the anchor, the one who understood the intricate weave of the cosmos. The quiet advance was over. The storm had truly arrived, and Vidar, the son of Heimdall, stood ready to face the tempest. The silence that had once enveloped him was now replaced by a roaring cacophony, the symphony of Ragnarok reaching its crescendo. Yet, within that din, Vidar found a strange calm. He was no longer just a watcher. He was an inheritor, a steward of what was to come. The ancient energies that had once been contained within the temple now pulsed through him, a conduit for the raw power of creation and destruction. He could feel the threads of destiny being rewoven, the old patterns dissolving and new ones emerging from the chaos. His purpose was not to resist this change, but to understand it, to guide it, and to ensure that from the ashes of the old, something enduring could rise. The very air seemed to hum with a new frequency, a vibration that spoke of possibilities, yet unimagined. The flashes of light were no longer chaotic, but began to coalesce, forming patterns that hinted at a grander design. The lament of Yggdrasil, though still mournful, was now interwoven with a resilient melody, a testament to the enduring power of life. Vidar's resolve solidified. He had been privy to the ancient energies, had felt the tremors of a world on the brink, and now, standing on these precipices, he was ready. The silence was finally broken, not in despair, but in anticipation. The true battle had indeed just begun, and he was its unwavering sentinel. He was the dawn in the twilight, the promise of continuity in the face of ultimate change.